Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Lettucehead Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Glitter Bombed Heroes. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Chapter 1. The Start of Vidian. Izuku Midoriya bounced on his heels, eyes sparkling with excitement. Mom, let's go already. Today was the day he would finally discover what his quirk was. Hold on, honey. Let me grab my things. Inko Midoriya chuckled at her son's enthusiasm. At 4 years old, getting a quirk was practically a rite of passage. And Izuku? He was sure he'd get something amazing, maybe telekinesis. Fire breathing. Something to rival his best friend, Katsuki Bakugo. The car ride was filled with his rambling about potential powers. Inko smiled, though she felt a twinge of nervousness. Then came the moment of truth. Izuku Midoriya? The doctor called. Inko raised her hand, guiding her son forward. All right, Izuku, we're going to take an X-ray, okay? He nodded eagerly, already imagining his future as a top hero. Then, the doctor's expression changed. I'm sorry, he said, his voice heavy with sympathy. You're quirkless. The words echoed in the sterile room. Inko didn't say anything. She simply grabbed Izuku by the collar and led him out, her face clouded with emotions he couldn't quite grasp. And that was the day Izuku Midoriya learned. Not everyone is born equal. From that moment on, everything changed. His mother stopped looking at him the same way. Katsuki Bakugo transformed from friend to tormentor. His teachers? They either ignored the bullying or dismissed it as playful teasing. At age 8, Izuku took matters into his own hands literally. He enrolled in self-defense classes, using his pocket money to attend dojos and study martial arts. By 9, he was sneaking out at night to observe street fights, learning how to fight dirty. By 10, he was breezing through high school and even some college-level textbooks. He had a knack for gadgets and computer science, a fancy way of saying he was good at hacking. At 12, his pain tolerance was nearly superhuman. It was morning when Izuku made breakfast for himself and Inko, then headed out for another day of school. As usual, he spotted Bakugo and his lackeys waiting for him. He groaned in irritation. By now, his pain tolerance had probably reached new heights. He avoided Bakugo and was having a peaceful day, admiring the red spider lilies and the notes scattered around. Izuku had grown so accustomed to this life that he was now judging the quality of the spider lilies. It was just the usual, the norm, until he found a note on the kitchen table. Dear Izuku, I can't stand living with you anymore. You made my husband leave. My friends left me. There's some money to get by for a few months. Don't look for me. Izuku read it twice, shrugged, and tossed it in the trash. Well, guess I'm on my own now. Later that day, while minding his own business, a sludge monster decided to engulf him. Are you kidding me right now? He complained. Thinking quickly, Izuku analyzed its structure, mostly water. He spotted its weak point and threw his literature textbook with pinpoint accuracy, hitting it right in the eye. Take that, you gooey menace. Oh, crap. That was my only copy. Izuku groaned, remembering his literature teacher would probably be furious. Before he could dwell on that tragedy, a familiar booming voice cut through the chaos. Don't worry, young man. I am here. Izuku blinked. No way. It was All Might. After capturing the villain, the hero turned to Izuku. Young man, did you do this? Yup, Izuku said, deadpan. Pretty cool, huh? All Might laughed. Impressive. But listen, kid, I need to... Izuku cut in, eyes burning with determination. Can quirkless people become heroes? The smile faltered. It's far too dangerous. Maybe you could be a police officer instead. Then he left. Izuku stood there for a long moment. Then he pulled out his newest gadget, a pen with a built-in recorder. The Record-O pen. That's some excellent material, he muttered. That night, he scoured the internet, searching for anything about quirkless heroes. Nothing. But then something caught his eye. Vigilantes. His mind raced. No legal recognition. No hero licenses. But they still help people. And technically, the law didn't apply to him because he was quirkless. He only needed to ensure that his opponents struck first to count as self-defense. For the first time in years, hope flared in his chest. He grabbed a notebook and started sketching. A ninja-style suit. A voice changer. Stealth gear. Then he went shopping. An amazing, reliable, comfy dark green hoodie check. More pockets? A mask? Well, store-bought ones weren't good enough. So, DIY time. Dagobah Beach was a goldmine of free materials. He spent days scavenging, building, and refining. By the end of the week, he had it. A sleek, black mask with intricate patterns. A voice changer. A reinforced hoodie with hidden compartments. His identity? That night, at 10 p.m., Vidian was born. Izuku's first night of patrol was exhilarating. For muggings stopped. One drag deal accidentally busted. And then a scream rang out in the distance. He crouched on a rooftop, analyzing the situation. Two thugs. One had a sound-based quirk. The other? Some mutation. Their victim a woman in her 30s. Perfect. Thug number 1 lunged at him first. Rookie mistake. Izuku took him down in seconds. Thug number 2 followed. Same result. The woman gaped. Oh my God, thank you. No problem. He grinned under his mask. Tell the police Vidian says hi. And just like that, he disappeared into the night. 4 months later. Stopping criminals? Rooftop parkour? Piece of cake. But Izuku's favorite pastime? Pranking the Muzutafu Police Department. Specifically, glitter bombing them. Officer Tsukachi Naomasa pinched the bridge of his nose as yet another suspect was delivered covered in glitter. This is getting out of hand, he groaned. 4 months. 4 months of this guy dropping off criminals like birthday presents and covering them in glitter. His partner, Sansa, barely held back a chuckle. At least he's effective? Tsukachi popped an aspirin. I need backup. Someone who specializes in dealing with vigilantes. He picked up the phone and dialed a number. It was time for the usual procedure for dealing with vigilantes who had been active for too long. He needed to add more people to the Vidian case. Tsukachi called the best pro-hero known for dealing with vigilantes effectively and quickly, the underground pro-hero Eraserhead. Eraserhead, we've got a situation. Before he could say anything else, another call came in. Sir, Vidian just took down an entire drag ring. Tsukachi slammed his head on his desk. I hate my life. Tsukachi was popping another headache pill in his mouth, gritting his teeth. It was time for the usual procedure for dealing with vigilantes who overstayed their welcome. He needed to add more people to the Vidian case. Tsukachi called the best pro-hero known for effectively handling vigilantes, the underground pro-hero, Eraserhead. However, before he could proceed, he received another call from a fellow officer, stating that Vidian had successfully taken down an entire drag ring. Izuku Midoriya hadn't expected it to feel like this. When he first started his nightly patrols months ago, it had been out of necessity a way to make a difference when he couldn't be the hero he always dreamed of. But now, months later, it had become something more. A routine. A second life he built when night fell. As Vidian, he moved through the shadows, finding his place in a world that seemed to grow darker by the day. The first few weeks had been rough. He was inexperienced, even clumsy. But with each night, he grew stronger. With each villain he faced, his confidence built, as did the quiet recognition from the people he saved. It had been slow. The crime rate didn't plummet overnight. At first, it felt like nothing more than a small ripple in the ocean, a single victory against an endless tide. But somewhere along the way, the tide began to shift. More and more, the streets felt safer, and the villains grew bolder in their retreat. The petty criminals he once dealt with started disappearing, their operations slowly dismantled by his efforts. No one seemed to notice at first. But after a few months, people began to speak of Vidian not just in hushed tones, but with a certain respect. And he finally made his stance, successfully taking down an entire drag ring single-handedly. Tsukachi rubbed his temples, his desk littered with reports, photos, and of course glitter. 4 months of this vigilante playing hero, 4 months of criminals being neatly delivered to their doorstep, for months of watching his officers struggle to clean up pink, sparkly glitter. It was impressive, frustratingly so. But Vidian had gone too far. The last case involved an entire drag ring being taken down single-handedly. That wasn't just street-level crime anymore, that was organized crime. And it was only a matter of time before Vidian got himself into serious trouble. The worst part? He was doing a better job than most heroes. He sighed, picking up the phone and dialing the number of one of the most efficient underground heroes he knew. Eraserhead, I need you on a case. There was a pause on the other end. A vigilante? Aizawa's voice was flat, but Tsukachi could sense a hint of curiosity. Not just any vigilante. He's smart, elusive, and far too competent for a teenager, which, by the way, I'm betting he is. Aizawa hummed, intrigued. Any leads? Nothing concrete. No clear quirk signature, no face. Just the alias, Vidian, and an ungodly amount of glitter. Glitter? Don't ask. Tsukachi pinched the bridge of his nose. Listen, I need you to keep an eye on him. Capture him if possible. He's either going to get himself hurt or turn into something worse. Aizawa was quiet for a moment. All right, I'll handle it. Aizawa preferred working in the shadows, and this job required just that. He spent the first week simply observing. Vidian's patterns weren't obvious at first glance, but Aizawa had experience with these things. He started noticing the subtle details: how Vidian tended to patrol near certain neighborhoods, how he left his presence at the same few police stations, how he never struck 2 nights in a row at the same place. Calculated. Efficient. Then there was the fighting. Aizawa had watched security footage of Vidian taking down a mugger, and the guy moved with practiced ease, quick, precise, and entirely too experienced. No wasted movements. No hesitation. Street smarts and combat training wrapped up in a vigilante-sized package. Tsukachi was right. This guy was irritatingly good at what he did. And that was the real problem. Because Vidian wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. He wasn't just some reckless kid throwing punches in the dark, he was prepared, and if Aizawa had to admit it, more efficient than half the heroes out there. That alone made him a threat. Aizawa exhaled through his nose, eyes narrowing. You've got skills, I'll give you that. But let's see how well you do against me. Izuku stretched his sore muscles as he crouched on the edge of a rooftop, scanning the streets below. Tonight felt different. Maybe it was paranoia, or maybe it was just experience, but something told him he was being watched. His grip tightened slightly on the edge of his hoodie. He needed to be careful. I swear, if this is another one of those nosy amateur heroes trying to unmask the mysterious vigilante, I'm going to lose it. He rolled his shoulders, exhaling through his nose. All right, Vidian. Either you're finally cracking, or someone actually competent is on your tail. His gut told him it was the latter. Izuku had to admit, the police and the heroes had been getting bolder lately. Their patrol routes were changing, getting closer to his usual spots. He knew he was being watched at the moment, just not by whom. That was the scariest part. Still, he couldn't help but smirk. I guess I should feel flattered. After all, it wasn't his fault. He was doing a better job than most heroes. The criminals feared him, the police were chasing him, and the heroes? Well, they were scrambling to figure him out. He wasn't just some reckless wannabe, he was effective. And if that meant making the so-called pros sweat a little, well, Izuku wasn't complaining. From a decent distance away, Aizawa watched from the shadows, his eyes narrowed. The way Vidian moved, the way his shoulders tensed as if he could feel the weight of unseen eyes, it was confirmation. The hunt had just begun. It was practically second nature to Izuku by now. Blend into the dark, know when to move, when to stay still, and most importantly when to run. And right now? Oh, it was definitely time to run. Izuku's instincts screamed at him move. And being the responsible vigilante he was, he listened. Without a second thought, he launched himself off the rooftop, twisting midair to catch a glimpse of the figure now standing where he'd just been. Oh, great. The underground legend himself. Eraserhead. Izuku hit the next rooftop in a roll, pushing off into a sprint. His mind raced just as fast as his feet. He had two options. Try to outmaneuver the man known for capturing the best criminals in the underground, or... No, actually, that was his only option. And he needed to make it quick. Izuku ducked another scarf strike, twisting into a handspring to put some extra distance between them. But Aizawa was persistent, moving with a casual sort of efficiency that screamed experience. No wasted movement, no unnecessary effort. Every step he took cut off an escape route, every flick of his scarf aimed to box Izuku in. Too bad for him, Izuku thrived on the unexpected. He faked right, baiting another scarf strike, then immediately dropped low and slid across the rooftop. He popped up behind a nearby chimney. Not bad, Aizawa mused. You've got skill. Izuku grinned under his mask. Thanks, I try. Though, I gotta say, I expected a little more from the great Eraserhead. I mean, where's the dramatic speech about how I should stop breaking the law and turn myself in? Did you forget your script at home? Aizawa sighed like this was the last thing he wanted to deal with tonight. I don't waste my breath on stubborn brats. My feelings. Izuku's feet barely touched the rooftop before something snapped around his wrist. A capture weapon. Izuku's eyes widened. Oh no. He twisted sharply, using his momentum to flip midair, loosening the hold just enough to wrench his hand free before landing in a crouch. He felt a burning sensation on his wrist from the friction but ignored it. Instead, he grinned under his mask. Nice try, but I'm not into getting tied up on the first date. Aizawa raised a brow. Flirting won't get you out of this. DMN. Worth a shot. Aizawa lunged again, his scarf whipping forward. Izuku ducked, dodging at the last second before backflipping onto a vent. He barely had time to catch his breath before Aizawa was on him again. The guy was relentless. Do you ever take a break? Or is this your idea of cardio? Izuku huffed, leaping to another rooftop. Keeping you from making a mess is its own workout, Aizawa deadpanned, his scarf nearly catching Izuku's ankle. Izuku twisted, spinning midair and landing in a roll. He skidded to a stop, only to see Aizawa already closing in. Then the guy was fast. Izuku threw himself into a wild, acrobatic dodge, vaulting over pipes, rolling under vents, using every bit of rooftop terrain to his advantage. He twisted midair, kicking off a billboard to redirect himself mid-jump. He landed on a lower rooftop, barely managing to keep his balance. Aizawa, however, simply jumped down after him like it was nothing. The man didn't even stumble. Oh, come on, Izuku groaned. That's just unfair. Aizawa didn't respond, simply flicking his scarf forward again. Izuku yelped, twisting at the last second. The scarf snagged his hoodie, and for a terrifying second, he thought he was caught, but then the fabric ripped, and he slipped free. Rude. Do you know how hard it is to find good hoodies? This was my favorite one. Then stop running, Aizawa replied dryly. Yeah, see, that's not really my thing. Then an idea struck. The ultimate weapon. The thing that had driven countless officers to madness. The glitter bomb. Izuku reached into his hoodie, pulled out a compact, and slammed it against the ground. Boom. Aizawa barely had time to react before the world exploded into a burst of green sparkles. Glitter shot up in a massive burst, coating everything in a 10-foot radius. It clung to his scarf, his hero suit, his hair. Aizawa coughed, waving a hand in front of his face, already regretting every life choice that led him to this moment. Izuku, meanwhile, was already moving. But he wasn't done yet. Oh no. A true artist didn't just create, they perfected their craft. Catch! He called, tossing another glitter bomb straight at Aizawa's feet. Aizawa's eyes widened a fraction. Oh, you little boom. Another explosion of glitter filled the air, coating Aizawa's entire upper body in layers of shimmering residue. His once black hero suit was now sparkling like a disco ball, his usually unruly hair now practically glowing under the city lights. Izuku bit back laughter as he scrambled away. I gotta say, not a bad look on you. Very festive. You'd fit right in at a New Year's party. Aizawa just stood there for a moment, arms at his sides, expression unreadable beneath the golden shimmer now adorning his face. Then, in the driest tone possible, he muttered, I hate this job. Izuku didn't stop moving, though. He knew better than to gloat for too long. The pro was probably already plotting 5 different ways to make his life miserable. But as he disappeared into the night, he couldn't help but grin. This was the most fun he'd had in months. Aizawa, on the other hand, sighed heavily as he picked glitter out of his hair. He wasn't sure whether to be annoyed or begrudgingly impressed. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear Vidian's amused voice call out, "Consider that a parting gift." "You're welcome." Aizawa whipped his head around, blinking through the glitter storm, but Vidian was already gone. The rooftops were empty, the only sign of him being the faintest echo of laughter on the wind. "Did I hate my life?" He turned, muttering curses under his breath, only to pause as he caught his reflection in a nearby window. Aizawa groaned. The glitter was everywhere. It shimmered in his hair, embedded itself in his scarf, and even clung stubbornly to his eyelashes. He wiped at his face, only to make it worse. And just when he thought the night couldn't get any worse, his phone buzzed. He glanced down at the screen. Tsukachi. He considered ignoring it. He should ignore it. But he picked up anyway. "What?" There was silence on the other end. Then, "Why do you sound like you're covered in glitter?" Aizawa hung up. Tsukachi was never going to let him live this down. "I hoped you liked this chapter." Chapter 1. The atmosphere was tense as Eraserhead faced Vidian, a figure shrouded in mystery. The dim light made it difficult for Eraserhead to discern the details of Vidian's appearance, especially with the mask obscuring his features. In a moment of frustration, Eraserhead made a swift motion, causing the fabric of Vidian's hoodie to tear, but it was more a blur of action than a clear view of what had transpired. As the confrontation escalated, the air crackled with energy. Eraserhead's determination was palpable, while Vidian stood his ground, a calm demeanor masking the intensity of the situation. The stakes were high, and both knew that this encounter would change everything. The tension between them was thick, charged with unspoken words and unresolved conflict. Each movement was deliberate, each glance filled with meaning. They were two forces colliding, each trying to assert their will in a world that demanded more than just strength. As the scene unfolded, the shadows danced around them, hinting at the chaos that lay just beneath the surface. The fight was not just physical, it was a battle of wills, a test of resolve that neither was willing to back down from. With every passing moment, the stakes grew higher, and the outcome remained uncertain. The night was far from over, and both Eraserhead and Vidian were prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Aizawa was on the brink of quitting hero work. He was exhausted, covered in glitter, and now he had to face the ultimate embarrassment: Naomasa Tsukachi. The moment Aizawa stepped into the police station, every officer in sight froze before slowly turning to stare. It felt like a scene from a horror movie, except the monster was him, shimmering like a holiday ornament. Aizawa regretted every decision that had led him to this moment. Tsukachi was a professional. He had confronted villains, interrogated deceivers, and uncovered the darkest secrets of the underworld. But nothing could have prepared him for the sight that greeted him when Aizawa stormed into the precinct that night. Glitter everywhere. Aizawa, the infamous underground hero known for his cold glares and deadly efficiency, looked like he had lost a battle with a craft store and the craft store had won. His usual deadpan expression remained intact, but the effect was somewhat diminished by the way golden-green sparkles clung to his eyelashes. Tsukachi blinked, then wheezed, and finally collapsed with laughter against his desk. Aizawa glared at Tsukachi, his so-called friend, who was doubled over in laughter. It was the kind of laughter that made his whole body shake, hands braced on his knees, gasping for air as if he had just run a marathon. Tsukachi gasped between laughs. "You look like a character from a fantasy movie I can't." He dissolved into another fit of laughter, slamming his hand against the desk. Aizawa took a long, slow inhale. He counted to 5, exhaled, contemplated his choices, and decided that revenge would be too much effort. "Did you at least get anything useful on him?" Tsukachi asked, finally recovering. Aizawa scowled, still plucking stray glitter from his eyelashes. "He's good. Really good. But he's a cocky little brat. And he came prepared." Tsukachi smirked. "Prepared as in glitter bombs?" Aizawa scowled harder. I will launch you into the sun. Tsukachi held up his hands in mock surrender. Alright, no more jokes. But seriously, what's your take? Aizawa sighed, glancing back toward the rooftops where Vidian had disappeared. He's skilled. Too skilled for some random kid playing Vigilante. I don't know where he learned to move like that, but if he wanted to, he could probably outmaneuver most pros. Tsukachi smirked. You know I'll be putting that in the official report, right? Aizawa sighed, running a hand down his face and only succeeding in smearing more glitter onto his fingers. I hate my life. Meanwhile, across the city, Izuku sat perched on a rooftop, staring down at his ripped hoodie. It had been a good hoodie, reliable, comfortable, warm, and stylish. Now, thanks to Eraserhead's capture weapon, it had a giant tear across the sleeve and a perfectly placed rip on the shoulder that made him look like he had survived a bear attack. Tragic. He should report it. He held it up dramatically, letting the wind flutter through the ruined fabric like some kind of funeral shroud. You were too young, he whispered solemnly. You had so much left to give. He sniffed, fully committed to this bit. You kept me warm through the cold nights. You had the perfect amount of pocket space. You never judged me when I spilled coffee on you. He clenched a fist. And now you are gone. A pigeon landed nearby and cooed at him. Izuku nodded gravely. Yes, you understand my pain. The pigeon cooed again. Izuku wiped an imaginary tear from his eye. Thank you for your support in this trying time. Unfortunately, he was also broke, which meant he needed a job. Which meant a customer service. With great reluctance, Izuku climbed down from the rooftop and made his way to the nearest clothing store. He found a decently priced dark green hoodie, to mourn the loss of the old one obviously, and as he stepped out of the shop, something caught his eye. A small cafe across the street had a sign in the window. Hiring baristas, no experience necessary. Age is debatable. Must be able to handle fast-paced work. Izuku squinted at it, then at his wallet, then back at the sign. He sighed, ugh, fine. He crossed the street and pushed open the door, the bell jingling above him. A man behind the counter, probably in his early 20s, glanced up from a newspaper. You here for coffee, or are you about to ask for a job? Izuku pointed dramatically at the hiring baristas sign. I'm poor. The man snorted. Great. You start now. Izuku blinked. You don't even know if I'm qualified. The barista John, as Izuku later learned, shrugged. You breathing? Yeah. Then congrats, you're overqualified. Izuku squinted. This sounds like a terrible hiring process. Probably, John agreed easily. But my boss is out of town, and I don't want to work alone. So, you got experience. Izuku thought about it. He did make coffee a lot back home, and he was good at it. Like, dangerously good. Like, one sip and you see the face of God, kind of good. He shrugged. Yeah, I guess. You're hired. Just like that. Dude, I'm making minimum wage. Do you really think I care? Izuku had to respect that level of apathy. Fair point. John turned out to be the definition of laid back. He moved at his own pace, slouching behind the counter like he had all the time in the world. His customer service skills were questionable at best, but somehow, people still liked him. Probably because he had the energy of someone who had accepted the chaos of life and simply decided to vibe with it. Izuku, on the other hand, excelled at making coffee. Terrifyingly so. His first customer took a sip of their latte and immediately looked like they had just glimpsed the divine. Another woman took a sip of her cappuccino and promptly declared that she was going to quit her job and follow her true passion of knitting dog sweaters. Word spread fast. Within days, people were lining up to get their fix. John, watching the flood of customers, simply nodded. You might actually make this place popular. Izuku smirked, wiping down the counter. I aim to please. He glanced out the window, mind wandering back to Eraserhead. That guy definitely needed a coffee. Maybe next time, he'd leave him a cup. With extra glitter. Just for fun. Sundays were supposed to be relaxing. They were for sleeping in, lazing around, and pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. Instead, Izuku found himself behind the counter of a tiny cafe, flipping cups and creating magic with caffeine. The place was small, but the atmosphere was warm and cozy, filled with the gentle hum of conversation. The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the air, wrapping around the customers like a comforting embrace. And Izuku? Well, he was a bit of a phenomenon. It had started simply: make good coffee, be polite, and avoid causing problems. But somewhere along the line, things had escalated. Customers came in, had a sip of his coffee, and never left. People actually waited in line for him. After John hired Izuku, they gained a loyal following, with customers lining up just for his coffee. John, the laid-back barista working alongside Izuku, was slightly shocked and unsure whether to be amused or concerned. "Izuku," John called from the back, "what are you putting in the coffee?" Izuku wiped his hands on a towel and shrugged. "Just skill." John squinted. "Are you sure you're quirkless?" "Absolutely," Izuku chirped. "Unless insane levels of talent count as a quirk." Before John could respond, the door jingled open, signaling the arrival of a very grumpy customer. Izuku barely had time to register the dark circles under his eyes, the hunched posture, and the permanent scowl before his heart raced. Oh no! Eraserhead had entered his cafe. Izuku forced himself to keep his hands steady as he grabbed a menu and approached the counter. "Welcome. What can I get for?" "Coffee. Black." Aizawa's voice was gravelly, as if he hadn't slept in days. He barely looked up, rubbing a hand down his face. Izuku nodded, trying to sound calm. "One black coffee, coming right up." "Stay calm." Aizawa was just another customer. Just a sleep-deprived, overworked, absolutely intimidating pro-hero who could erase quirks and had already tried to catch him as Vidian, the vigilante he had glitter-bombed more times than he could count. No big deal. Totally fine. Izuku poured everything he had into making the best cup of coffee Aizawa had ever tasted. He selected the perfect beans, ground them to perfection, and used the precise water temperature to extract the most flavor. With the confidence of a seasoned artist, he slid the cup onto the counter. Aizawa took one sip and paused. Izuku held his breath. Then, in a slow, almost reverent motion, Aizawa took another sip. And another. "This is decent." Izuku grinned. "Glad you like it?" Aizawa peered at him over the rim of his cup, eyes narrowing slightly. "You work here often?" Izuku shrugged. "Every day, 4 to 9 in the morning." Aizawa took another long sip, then grunted. "I'll be back." And just like that, he turned and walked out the door, coffee in hand. Izuku watched him go, then came to a horrible realization. Eraserhead was probably going to come here much more often. And he, Vidian, was the vigilante Eraserhead was trying to catch. Izuku gripped the counter like it was his only lifeline. "DM it." Then he turned to John, who was staring at him with a mix of awe and concern. "Midoriya," John said slowly, "I think you just acquired a very scary, very loyal customer." Izuku let out a weak laugh. "Yeah. Lucky me." Then, as if fate itself wanted to test his sanity, his phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number lit up the screen. "Unknown number, you are the only acceptable barista now. Don't disappoint me." Izuku stared. "Oh God," he muttered. Meanwhile, across town, a certain detective sighed as he received a very short, concerning text from his old friend. "Aizawa, found a new cafe. Good coffee. Barista knows what he's doing." "Tsukachi, do I want to know?" Aizawa, "No." After his shift ended, Izuku decided to take a walk before heading home. The city was just waking up, and the streets were still quiet, save for the occasional early morning commuter. He stuffed his hands in his pockets, enjoying the rare moment of peace until he heard it. A muffled voice. A sharp laugh. Then the unmistakable sound of a rough shove. As he stepped out of the cafe on his short break, he spotted 3 older kids cornering a smaller, scrawny boy with unruly purple hair. The kid was slumped against the wall, fists clenched at his sides, looking up at them with a blank, unimpressed stare. Izuku recognized that look. It was the same one he used to have when Bakugo and his lackeys decided he was their favorite target. That look that said, I refuse to give you the satisfaction of seeing me break. His stomach twisted. One of the bullies shoved the kid's shoulder. Say something, freak. Come on, brainwash me. Or are you too scared? The purple-haired kid said nothing. His face remained passive, but Izuku could see his fingers twitch, as if he wanted to fight back but knew it wouldn't end well. Izuku sighed. He had just managed to avoid trouble for the day. Well, hey, idiots! Izuku called, stuffing his hands in his apron pockets. You guys auditioning for a new comedy gig? Because this performance is tragic. The bullies snapped their heads toward him, scowling. Who the hell are you? Izuku pet his head. Just a concerned citizen. Also, someone who makes really good coffee, apparently. He gestured toward the café. Now, unless you want a public lesson in getting your butts handed to you, I suggest you run along. One of them sneered. You think you're tough? Izuku smiled, slow and sharp. No, but I don't need to be. Because unlike you, I can actually use my brain. He took a single step forward, just enough for his presence to feel imposing. And if you had any self-preservation, you'd recognize the warning signs of someone who really doesn't care about playing fair. The air turned heavy. The lead bully took an uneasy step back. Tisich, whatever. Freaks like you deserve each other. They left, grumbling insults under their breath, but none of them dared to look back. Izuku exhaled, then turned his attention to the purple-haired kid, who was still sitting on the ground, watching him with an unreadable expression. Hey, Izuku said, offering a hand. You okay? The kid hesitated, then accepted the help, letting Izuku pull him to his feet. You're kinda beat up, Izuku noted, scanning the scrapes and bruises on his arms. Wanna come inside? I can help you out. The kid hesitated again but eventually nodded. Sure. Izuku led him into the cafe, calling out, Hey, John, taking a quick break to play nurse. Don't burn the place down, John said, barely looking up as he refilled the pastries. He waved a hand dismissively. No promises. Izuku snorted and led the kid into the back room, where he retrieved a first aid kit. Sit. The kid complied, sitting stiffly on a stool. So, Izuku began, applying antiseptic to a cut. What's your name, or should I just call you Broody McSilence? The kid gave him a flat look. Hitoshi Shinso. I'm Izuku Midoriya. You can call me Izuku. Or, Savior of your morning, if you prefer. Shinso huffed a quiet laugh. Right. Izuku smirked. You don't talk much, huh? Shinso's expression shifted slightly. People don't like my quirk. Izuku paused for a moment before continuing to bandage him. Let me guess. You tell someone to do something and they have to listen. Shinso's eyes narrowed slightly, wary. Yeah. Izuku hummed. Sounds pretty cool. Shinso blinked. Most people don't think so. Well, most people just don't get it. Shinso let out a sharp, surprised laugh, then quickly returned to his neutral expression. You're weird. Izuku grinned. Thank you, I try. A comfortable silence settled between them as Izuku finished patching him up. Finally, he leaned back, crossing his arms. Good as new. Now, tell me, do you want a coffee? It's on the house. Perks of knowing the barista. Shinso eyed him. You're just trying to bribe me into coming back, aren't you? Izuku placed a hand over his heart. I am offended by that accusation. Then he grinned. But yes, I am. Shinso shook his head but didn't protest. Fine. I guess I'll come back. Izuku gave him a lazy salute. Welcome to the best cafe in town. We have great coffee, questionable decisions, and apparently, now, a stray cat. Shinso rolled his eyes. I hate you already. Izuku beamed. That's the spirit. Over the past few days, Hitoshi Shinso had become a regular at Izuku's cafe. Not just a casual visitor, but a full-fledged coffee-dependent regular. The first time had been a simple, thank you, visit after Izuku had saved him from some bullies. The second time had been out of curiosity. The third? Well, the third time had sealed his fate. The moment Hitoshi took his first sip of Izuku's coffee, he blinked, stared at the cup as if it held the meaning of life, and uttered a single, reverent phrase. "This is incredible." Izuku merely grinned. "Good, right? Good." Hitoshi looked borderline offended. This is practically an awakening. I can see stars." Izuku laughed, taking that as the highest form of praise. And that was how Hitoshi found himself coming back to the cafe every single morning at early hours just to get his caffeine fix. Izuku, ever the enabler, only made it worse by experimenting with different flavors and blends that somehow always hit the perfect balance between kickstarts your soul and probably illegal levels of good. Then there was Aizawa. Ever since his first visit, Aizawa had also become a staple of the cafe, much to Izuku's horror and John's growing amusement. The pro-hero barely spoke, simply dragging himself in at early hours, muttering something about the usual, and then disappearing into his coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping him alive. The fact that both Aizawa and Hitoshi had latched onto his coffee was amusing and terrifying. If Aizawa ever caught onto who Izuku really was, well, he didn't want to know. Jail probably doesn't have any coffee beans. Izuku never brought up quirks, and neither did Hitoshi. They didn't need to. It was an unspoken rule between them, an understanding forged in shared experience. They had both been bullied, mocked, and cast aside for something out of their control. For Izuku, it was his lack of a quirk. For Hitoshi, it was the fact that his quirk screamed villain material. But here, in this tiny cafe, none of that mattered. Here, they were just two people who understood each other better than most. Later that night, over the past 5.5 months, Izuku had been a relentless force against crime in Japan. The crime rate had dropped sharply, so sharply, it could compare to a celebrity's jawline. Coincidentally, that just so happened to align with his activities. Which meant that the pro-heroes were now very invested in catching him. "Great," Izuku muttered as he pulled on his gloves. "More people chasing me. Just what I needed." Endeavor had tried to incinerate him more than once. It was frustrating. Fortunately, Izuku was as good at escaping as he was at fighting. But the universe had a cruel sense of humor and decided to throw him directly into Eraserhead's path. Izuku zipped up his vigilante gear and stretched, rolling his shoulders as he prepared for another patrol. The city had been quieter lately, and while that should have been a good thing, it only made him feel like something big was brewing beneath the surface. He was halfway through his usual route when his instincts screamed at him. Move. A flicker of movement. A presence. He didn't even have time to react before. You again. Izuku barely managed to twist out of the way as Eraserhead's capture weapon lashed out at him. Oh, for goodness sake. He flipped back, landing smoothly on a street lamp. You know, for a guy who just popped out of nowhere to catch me, this is very rude. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You heroes really need to work on your manners. Ever heard of hello first? Maybe a how's your night going? Izuku drawled, lazily dodging another lash of the scarf. Or do you just go straight to attempted capture? Aizawa exhaled sharply. Says the vigilante. Touché. Izuku grinned. But really, Eraserhead, you should be thanking me. Crime's down, and I haven't even sent you my consulting fee yet. Aizawa's eye twitched. You're an unlicensed menace. And you're a licensed insomniac. Let's call it even. Aizawa didn't dignify that with a response. Instead, he moved fast. Izuku barely twisted out of the way, flipping onto another rooftop just in time. Sheesh, fine. Guess you don't appreciate my hard work. Aizawa lunged again. Izuku leaped back. A brilliant idea popped into his head. The one thing that all police staff collectively hated him for. Glitter bomb. With a dramatic flick of his wrist, Izuku lobbed a small device toward Aizawa's feet. A hurricane of glitter exploded around the underground hero, the sheer force of it sending a dazzling cloud of gold and silver specks cascading through the air like a firework finale. Aizawa's eyes widened, full of dread. And with that, Izuku threw the first glitter bomb. Aizawa reacted instantly, twisting to avoid the worst of it, but the thing detonated midair, coating half of his scarf and one sleeve in sparkling green devastation. Izuku didn't waste time savoring his masterpiece. He bolted, leaping across the gap between rooftops, already priming another bomb just in case. Aizawa cursed and shook his arm out, but Glitter was merciless. That scarf wasn't coming clean anytime soon. I'm going to make you regret that, Aizawa growled, voice tight with barely restrained frustration. Oh no, Izuku gasped dramatically. The terrifying underground hero is mad at me. Whatever will I do? He threw another bomb over his shoulder for good measure and took off at full speed, dodging between structures to break line of sight. He knew he wouldn't be able to outrun Eraserhead forever, but he didn't have to, he just needed to be unpredictable enough to shake him. The world sparkled. The earth shimmered. There was a long, long silence. Then, in a voice so dry it could have withered a cactus, Aizawa muttered, I hate you. Izuku, now perched safely on another rooftop, snickered. You should really change your aesthetic. Color really suits you. Aizawa wiped a hand down his glitter-covered face, his expression utterly dead inside. Somewhere, deep in his soul, he knew Tsukachi was going to laugh at him again. Izuku gave a mock salute. Well, it's been fun, Eraserhead. Same time next week? Well, I'll let fate decide. Toodles. And just like that, he was gone, vanishing into the night like a mischievous ghost. Aizawa sighed heavily, glitter still falling around him in slow, mocking twinkles. I swear, I'm going to find him and duct tape him to the ceiling. He was definitely going to try to avoid Tsukachi. Last time, it had been a routine patrol. A standard chase. A perfectly normal pursuit of a vigilante. Until the glitter. It was everywhere. His hair. His scarf. His hero costume. The insidious particles clung to him like a cursed dust, refusing to be brushed off no matter how hard he tried. And then there was Tsukachi. The detective took one look at him, just one look, before bursting into laughter so hard that he had to hold onto his desk for support. Aizawa had never known true embarrassment until that moment. Izuku let out a quiet laugh, watching Eraserhead from a distance, shaking his head. I really love my life. Izuku Midoriya had always known that being a vigilante would eventually come with more risks. He had accepted that. It was just a matter of when. Apparently, when was now. After nearly 6 months of patrols, crime stopping, and generally making pro-heroes look bad at their jobs, Izuku had attracted the attention of someone he really didn't want scrutinizing him, Nizu. Nizu, the hyper-intelligent principal of UA High, was a walking enigma with a penchant for strategic manipulation. He was possibly the only being alive that Izuku was genuinely concerned about encountering. The heroes? He could outfight or outrun them. But Nizu? Nizu was a different kind of terrifying. After his shift at the café, Izuku stretched and rolled his shoulders, enjoying the brief moment of peace before heading out for another night as Vidian. Things were getting more complicated. Over the past few weeks, his actions had gained more attention not just from street-level heroes, but from someone far more dangerous, Nizu. The principal of UA had an infamous reputation, not just for his intelligence but for his unpredictability. His mind worked in ways no one could truly anticipate, making him a particularly dangerous opponent. But if there was one comfort in all of this, it was that Nizu, for all his genius, still had no idea who Vidian really was. And that was rare. Izuku sighed, staring at his reflection in the cafe's window. The dim glow of the streetlights outside cast his features in a softer light, making him look almost normal. Like a regular 14-year-old locking up after a long shift, instead of a wanted vigilante with half the pro-heroes in Japan trying to track him down. His lips quirked into a small smirk. They can try. UA conference room, pro-hero meeting. The atmosphere in the room was tense. Seated around the large table were some of the most trusted pro-heroes. Endeavor, Midnight, Present Mike, Ectoplasm, Hound Dog, Cementos, Snipe, and Eraserhead. At the head of the table, Nizu sipped his tea with his usual pleasant, unreadable smile. Thank you all for coming, Nizu began, setting his cup down delicately. As you are all aware, the vigilante known as Vidian has been an increasingly prominent factor in the decline of crime rates across Japan. Over the past 5.5 months, This individual has been responsible for an unprecedented decrease in crime across multiple districts. Robberies, gang activity, violent incidents, all of it has dropped significantly. What's more fascinating, however, is the efficiency. The screen flickered, showing timestamps of various incidents, all displaying rapid resolutions. Endeavor scoffed, crossing his arms. A criminal is a criminal. We should have shut him down months ago. I understand your frustration, Nizu said with a small chuckle. However, this is no ordinary vigilante. Vidian has outmaneuvered multiple pro heroes, including you, Endeavor, without so much as a trace of his identity being exposed. Ectoplasm leaned forward, arms crossed. Do we have any leads? Nizu's expression remained pleasant, but his voice took on a tone of rare reluctance. Unfortunately, very little. No fingerprint records, no recognizable fighting style that matches any known martial arts academies, and no connections that we can pinpoint. He is remarkably elusive. The room fell silent at that. A vigilante outsmarting trained pro heroes for months was one thing, but the fact that Nizu Yue's principal and a tactical genius had no substantial leads was another. A slow, unsettling realization spread through the room. If Nizu was struggling, then Vidian was an entirely different kind of problem. So you're saying, Midnight began carefully, that we know nothing? Nizu swirled his tea, his grin widening ever so slightly. Precisely. That single word sent a wave of unease through the room. Nizu always had something. A theory, a strategy, a contingency. But now, nothing. And if Nizu didn't have an answer, then what chance did they have? Hound Dog growled under his breath, his claws tapping against the table. That's concerning. Cementos folded his arms. If even you don't have a lead, then how does he keep slipping past us? Nizu let out a delighted little laugh. Oh, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's been ages since I've had a true challenge. I must say, I'm quite enjoying this mystery. Endeavor's scowl deepened. This isn't a game. Nizu's grin never wavered. Oh, but it is. And right now, Vidian is winning. A heavy silence followed. Midnight sighed. And if we don't stop him soon, he might get reckless. Eraserhead, who had been silent until now, rubbed his temples. Reckless? He's calculated. Every move he makes is deliberate. He knows exactly how far to push without crossing the line. Endeavor scoffed. And yet, for all his so-called calculated ways, he still resorts to childish antics. His glare slid toward Aizawa, who simply exhaled through his nose, unwilling to engage. Nizu's ears twitched in amusement. Pious. The glitter bombing. The room was silent for approximately 3 seconds before Present Mike snorted. Midnight outright giggled. Even Cementos looked vaguely amused. Aizawa resisted the urge to groan. Tsukachi had not let him live the last incident down, and now his co-workers were in on the humiliation. Perfect. Nizu hummed, clicking to another slide. Moving on from Eraserhead's misfortunes. Aizawa shot him a glare. The principal merely smiled wider. A small hum left Nizu's throat as he poured himself more tea. Then let's solve this problem. I want every pro hero in this room to begin tracking Vidian more actively. We need to flush him out. Let's see how he responds. The mood in the room was grim. If Vidian had managed to stay hidden this long, he wouldn't go down easily. But now, he had something far worse than just heroes chasing him. He had Nizu's undivided attention. Meanwhile, Izuku yawned as he locked up his café for the night, stretching his arms behind his head. The streets were quieter than usual, but he could feel the change. The way the patrols had increased, the number of heroes lingering in his usual routes. It was subtle, but it was there. They're getting serious, huh? He murmured to himself, a grin tugging at his lips. Instead of worry, he felt exhilaration. If they were stepping up their game, so would he. Shrugging, he adjusted his hoodie and disappeared into the night, already planning his next move. Because if the pro heroes thought they were going to catch him that easily, they had another thing coming. Once upon a time in a faraway kingdom, there lived a young woman named Snow White. She was known for her beauty and kindness, which drew the attention of many, including a vain and jealous queen. The queen, consumed by her desire to be the fairest in the land, resorted to dark magic to maintain her beauty. One day, the queen summoned her loyal huntsman and ordered him to take Snow White deep into the forest and ensure she would never return. However, the huntsman, moved by Snow White's innocence and charm, could not bring himself to harm her. Instead, he warned her to flee and never look back. Snow White ran through the forest, her heart racing as she sought refuge. She stumbled upon a quaint cottage, where she found 7 dwarfs who welcomed her with open arms. They quickly formed a bond, and Snow White felt safe for the first time in a long while. Meanwhile, the queen discovered that Snow White was still alive and devised a plan to eliminate her once and for all. Disguised as an old peddler woman, she approached the cottage with a poisoned apple, promising it would grant Snow White eternal beauty. Unaware of the queen's true intentions, Snow White took a bite and fell into a deep slumber. The dwarfs were heartbroken but vowed to protect her. They placed her in a glass coffin, hoping that one day, someone would come to break the spell. Time passed, and a brave prince heard tales of the beautiful maiden trapped in slumber. He ventured to the cottage, and upon seeing Snow White, he was captivated by her beauty. With a gentle kiss, the prince awakened Snow White, breaking the queen's curse. The dwarfs rejoiced, and the prince and Snow White fell in love, promising to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. The queen, realizing her defeat, vanished into the shadows, never to be seen again. And so, Snow White and her prince lived happily ever after, surrounded by friends who had become family, proving that love and kindness always triumph over jealousy and darkness. Izuku slipped into his vigilante gear, adjusting the mask that concealed his identity. He exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar weight of his utility belt settle around his waist. Tonight was just like any other patrol: prevent crime, annoy some heroes, and, if he was lucky, maybe even grab some taiyaki before heading home. He didn't expect to single-handedly take down an entire drag ring that the heroes had been struggling to locate for over a year. But hey, life was full of surprises. Previously, Vidian crouched on the rooftop, surveying the alley below. A group of men stood in a loose circle, exchanging packages that screamed illegal activity. Seriously, he muttered under his breath. You'd think after a year of running this operation, they'd learn to be subtle. Leaping down, he landed silently behind the nearest thug. Before the guy could react, Vidian grabbed him by the collar and yanked him backward, causing him to stumble into a nearby crate. The rest of the gang turned, stunned by the sudden attack. "All right, gentlemen," Vidian drawled, casually twirling a stolen crowbar. "I could introduce myself, but seeing as you're all up to illegal nonsense, I don't think you deserve the courtesy." "You little," one of the thugs charged at him, only to be swiftly kicked aside. "I was talking," Vidian said, sighing as the man collapsed. "Rude." The fight lasted less than 10 minutes. A combination of swift movement, well-aimed strikes, and just enough snark to keep his mood light left the entire operation in ruins. The remaining thugs lay groaning on the ground, their merchandise scattered. Just as he tied up the last guy, sirens wailed in the distance, signaling the arrival of the very heroes who had failed to track down this ring for months. Vidian dusted off his gloves and saluted the unconscious men before grappling up to a nearby rooftop. "Better luck next time, guys," he called out, vanishing into the night. The news spread quickly. At first, people were just shocked. How had a single vigilante taken down something the pros had spent a year chasing with no results? But then the realization settled in: Vidian had been doing much more good than harm. Unlike the heroes, who sometimes arrived too late or let criminals slip through the cracks, Vidian was efficient. People started calling for him when they needed help, whispering his name into the night like a prayer. And somehow, he always managed to show up at the right place at the right time. No one knew how he did it. Some swore he had a police scanner hidden somewhere. Others thought he had inside information. But the truth? Vidian had no fancy gadgets tracking crime. He just listened. Every scream, every cry, every desperate plea for help, it was like he had a built-in beacon, leading him straight to those in need. And he never failed to answer. UA High School Pro Hero Meeting Room. So, Midnight tapped her fingers on the table. He's faster than us, more efficient than us, and people like him. Hound Dog growled. This is getting out of hand. Nizu's beady eyes gleamed with intrigue. Quite fascinating, isn't it? No, Endeavor said flatly. It's infuriating. The pro heroes present in the previous meeting had come to a collective agreement they needed to catch Vidian. Immediately. The first to try? Endeavor. Vidian barely dodged as a wall of fire erupted behind him. For real? He called out, flipping off the side of a building to avoid another jet of flame. You're really throwing fire around this close to civilians? You'd think Japan's #2 hero would be more careful. Endeavor scowled, flames roaring higher. You think you can make a fool out of the heroes? Vidian grinned beneath his mask. I mean, I don't think I know. Endeavor lunged, but Vidian had already moved, slipping through a narrow alleyway where the bulkier hero couldn't follow. But the chase didn't end there. Flames scorched the pavement behind him as Endeavor relentlessly pursued, forcing Vidian into a constant sprint. His grappling hook whirred as he swung between buildings, narrowly avoiding a fireball that singed the edge of his cloak. This is starting to feel personal, Vidian muttered, twisting midair to dodge another burst of heat. The moment his feet touched the ground, he bolted, twisting around corners and using the city itself as cover. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of dodging fire and narrowly avoiding capture, Vidian darted into an underground maintenance tunnel, vanishing before Endeavor could follow. When the #2 hero finally landed, all that remained was a mocking note taped to the wall. Nice try. Better luck next time, hothead. And just as Endeavor's eyes narrowed, something clicked. A small, inconspicuous device attached to the wall blinked once before. A detonation of glitter erupted with spectacular force, a rainbow explosion engulfing Japan's #2 hero in a sparkling, clinging mess of absolute humiliation. The glitter embedded itself into every crevice of his suit, his hair, even his eyelashes. He stood there, fuming as the last few specks drifted lazily to the ground. Endeavor let out a low, guttural growl. The entire block had probably seen that. At UA, as he stormed into the pro-hero meeting room still covered in glitter, the reaction was immediate. Midnight choked on her drink. Present Mike wheezed, struggling to contain his laughter. Snipe politely turned away, but his shaking shoulders gave him away. Hound Dog outright howled with amusement. And Eraserhead? He froze, pupils shrinking as a flashback overtook him. The first time Vidian had glitter bombed him. Then the second time. The absolute horror. The sheer inescapability of it. He watched, dead-eyed, as Endeavor futilely tried to dust himself off. It never comes off, Aizawa muttered, voice hollow. Nizu, meanwhile, sipped his tea, looking absolutely thrilled. One by one, the pro-heroes assigned to capture him failed. Ectoplasm's clones? Evaded with a combination of acrobatics and well-timed smoke bombs, leaving the hero chasing nothing but shadows. Snipe's sharpshooting? Dodged with an almost supernatural awareness, ducking bullets and disappearing behind cover before the pro could even take proper aim. Hound Dog's scent tracking? Outwitted by a strategically placed bag of old socks, courtesy of an abandoned gym locker, and an array of misleading scent trails, each leading to nowhere useful. The poor hero had never growled in such frustration before. Each attempt only further solidified Vidian's reputation as an untouchable ghost in the night. His ability to outmaneuver, outthink, and outright humiliate his pursuers made him legendary among those who whispered about him in Nizudafu's darker corners. And Nizu? Oh, Nizu was delighted. Because Vidian was now more than just an anonymous vigilante. He was a mystery, a challenge, a puzzle wrapped in an enigma with a dash of sass for flavor. And if there was one thing Nizu couldn't resist, it was solving a mystery. Nizu wasn't one to let a mystery go unsolved, and Vidian was proving to be the most frustrating mystery he had encountered in years. A vigilante with no known background, no traceable connections, and most annoyingly no clear weaknesses. So, he took action. Handpicking a team of pro-heroes, Nizu assigned them a singular mission, find and capture Viridian. Their previous attempts had all ended in failure, humiliation, or a stubborn amount of glitter. But Nizu had faith. If anyone could track down the elusive Vigilante, it would be this team. He sipped his tea, watching as monitors flickered to life in front of him. Surveillance footage, hero reports, and crime scene reconstructions filled the screens. If Viridian had a pattern, Nizu would find it. And if he had a weakness, Nizu would exploit it. Meanwhile, it was a relatively slow night in the abandoned parts of Muzutafu for Viridian, blissfully unaware of Nizu's renewed hunt, patrolling the streets as always. It was the kind of night where crime was scarce, thugs were hiding, and even the air felt quieter. Viridian adjusted his gloves as he hopped across rooftops, the city stretching before him like a dark maze. The heroes may have ignored the forgotten parts of Muzutafu, but Viridian never did. These streets, abandoned by the law, were the ones that needed him most. The people here appreciated him, sometimes leaving food or supplies where he would find them, a quiet way of saying thank you to the unseen protector that cared when no one else did. He was a ghost, a whisper in the dark, the name criminals feared to hear spoken in hushed warnings. Tonight, however, his patrol was uneventful until the commotion started. Shouts. The sound of fists colliding. The flickering glow of fire illuminating the alleyway below. Viridian crouched low on the rooftop, eyes narrowing. A gang 14 members, heavily armed, was against a single man. A single man with blue flames flickering at his fingertips. Huh. Viridian tilted his head. Fire Guy's got some moves. But not enough moves. The gang was relentless, dodging, swarming, and outnumbering him. The fire user was skilled, but he was slowing down, his movements growing sluggish. The gangsters were getting cocky, their strikes bolder. One managed to land a hit, then another. Viridian sighed. All right, that's enough of that. With practiced ease, he dropped into the fray. The first thug didn't even see it coming. Viridian's boot connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling. The next two barely had time to react before they were disarmed, slammed against the alley wall, and left groaning on the ground. The rest turned, eyes wide. Hello, gentlemen. Viridian gave a lazy wave. I see you've picked the worst possible target for your little brawl. Mind if I cut in? The gang didn't appreciate his humor. Too bad for them, Viridian was already moving. It wasn't a fight, it was a swift resolution. Dodging between them with ease, Viridian struck fast, precise, and relentless. One by one they fell. Some tried to run. Some tried to fight back. Neither worked. Within minutes, the gang lay unconscious, scattered across the alley like discarded trash. Viridian exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Phew. Good workout. Then he turned to the fire user, who was swaying unsteadily on his feet, blinking groggily at him. You good there, Flames? Viridian asked. The man barely managed to lift his gaze before his knees buckled. Viridian caught him before he could hit the ground. Of course you pass out, he muttered. Because why not? He glanced around, considering his options. Taking him home was out of the question. Too risky. Instead, he settled on an old warehouse he sometimes used as a resting spot after patrols. Dobby woke up to the dim glow of a single overhead light. He groaned, sitting up on the worn-out mattress, blinking as his surroundings came into focus. The warehouse was quiet, the only sound being the occasional drip of water from a leaky pipe. Then he saw him, the masked vigilante, arms crossed, watching him with a mix of curiosity and mild exasperation. Well, you're finally up, Viridian remarked. Thought I'd have to start charging rent. Dobby's gaze flicked around the room before settling back on his apparent rescuer. Where am I? Temporary safe house, Viridian answered. You were getting overwhelmed by some thugs. I stepped in. You passed out. I patched you up. You're welcome. Dobby blinked slowly. Then he snorted. Didn't ask for help. Viridian shrugged. Didn't ask for your attitude, but here we are. Dobby leaned back against the wall, rolling his shoulders. He could still feel the ache of overusing his flames, but at least he wasn't dead. For a while, neither spoke. The silence stretched, but it wasn't tense, just two strangers sizing each other up, each trying to figure out what the other wanted. Finally, Dobby broke it. So, you're the infamous Viridian, huh? Viridian tilted his head slightly. Depends. Are you asking as a fan, a skeptic, or an opportunist? Dobby smirked, amused. Everyone's heard of you. The vigilante that makes heroes look incompetent and villains nervous. Viridian hummed. Flattering, but I prefer unmatched force of justice and general annoyance. Dobby snorted. Cocky, aren't you? Viridian shrugged. Confidence is just preparation in a fancy outfit. Dobby studied him for a moment. He wasn't rattled, but he wasn't reckless either. Sharp eyes, controlled movements. Not just some lucky punk running on adrenaline. So, Viridian continued, shifting his weight casually. Who were those guys? Dobby hesitated, then shrugged. Idiots. That's vague. Dobby smirked. That's intentional. Viridian gave an exaggerated sigh. Fine. Keep your secrets. Dobby chuckled lowly, his smirk lazy but his eyes sharp. Why are you patrolling this area, anyway? Viridian tilted his head slightly, as if considering whether to answer. Because someone has to. Dobby hummed. That's vague. That's intentional, Viridian shot back, mirroring his earlier words. Dobby smirked, rolling his shoulders. So, what, you just spend your nights running across rooftops and stopping thugs? Viridian gave him a dry look. I prefer efficient crime deterrent, but sure. Dobby let out a rough chuckle. And here I thought the heroes were bad with their slogans. Hey, at least mine's honest. Dobby studied him for a long moment. The kid, because up close, that's what he was, a kid was good. Too good. He carried himself with the sharp-edged confidence of someone who'd seen more than he should have, but there was a wariness beneath it too. Like he knew better than to trust anyone too quickly. All right, Viridian, Dobby said, voice slow, testing. You've got a hell of a reputation. Even villains don't like running into you. But that doesn't answer why. Why are you really out here? Viridian leaned against a crate, arms crossed. Because someone has to be. Dobby arched a brow. That's the best you got? Sounds like a brochure for hero agencies. Yeah, well, I don't work for them, do I? Viridian's tone was flat, but there was an edge to it. They gave up on places like this. I didn't. Dobby hummed, tapping his fingers against his knee. Is that some kind of hero complex, or are you just that stubborn? Viridian exhaled, shaking his head. You don't get it. And honestly? That's fine. I don't need you to. Dobby let the silence stretch between them. There was something almost familiar about the way the kid talked, like he'd faced disappointment one too many times but still refused to give up. Eventually he snorted. You've got some nerve, kid. I'll give you that. Viridian tilted his head, debating whether to take it as a compliment. I get that a lot. Dobby rolled his eyes, shifting. To stand. Well, thanks for the patch-up and all, but I should. Sit down, Viridian interrupted, not unkindly. You're still too drained to go anywhere. Dobby gave him a long, amused look before settling back against the wall. Bossy, aren't you? Efficient crime deterrent, remember? Viridian shot back. Dobby chuckled lowly, shaking his head. You really don't trust anyone, do you? Viridian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied Dobby, green eyes calculating behind his mask. Trust is expensive. Costs more than most people are willing to pay. Dobby smirked. Did you rehearse that one? Viridian rolled his eyes. Nope. Just a perk of being observant. Silence settled between them again, but this time it felt different. Less tense, more understanding. Neither of them had to say it out loud, but there was a strange familiarity in the way they danced around each other's words, like two people who had seen too much, done too much, and yet still found themselves here. Dobby exhaled, rubbing a hand through his hair. You're annoying, kid. Viridian's lips twitched under the mask. I get that a lot. Dobby glanced at him again, this time with curiosity, like someone trying to piece together a puzzle. You keep this up, you'll get yourself in trouble. And yet, here I am. Dobby snorted. Stubborn little one. Viridian shrugged. Efficient crime deterrent. Dobby huffed a laugh, shaking his head. Yeah. Whatever you say, Viridian. For the first time that night, Vidian didn't correct him. He just stood there wary but not entirely untrusting. And for now, that was enough. 3 months had passed since that fateful night in the alleyway, and somehow, against all odds, Vidian and Dobby had settled into an odd, yet strangely comfortable rhythm. It hadn't been an easy transition, trust never was, especially between a vigilante and a villain. Izuku was cautious, wary of the implications of keeping a villain close, while Dobby remained aloof, always ready to disappear if things ever felt too risky. But despite that, they kept coming back to each other. It started with Dobby showing up at the warehouse, often sporting fresh burns or injuries from whatever chaos he'd stirred up that night. Vidian would grumble and complain, maybe throw in a dramatic sigh for effect, but he still patched him up every single time. You know, Izuku mused one night, wrapping a bandage around Dobby's arm, you wouldn't need to keep crashing here if you stopped playing with fire. Dobby smirked lazily, resting his head back against the crate he was sitting on. That's like telling you to stop playing hero, vigilante. Izuku hummed. Fair point. What had started as necessity turned into routine, then into something more. Dobby didn't just come back for first aid anymore, he came back for company. It was never explicitly said, neither of them were the type, but the quiet companionship spoke for itself. Dobby would linger after being patched up, sitting on one of the worn-out crates while Izuku tinkered with his gear or planned his patrol routes. One night, they were casually talking in an alleyway in the abandoned parts of Muzutafu when a group of nearly 20 thugs emerged from the shadows. Izuku and Dobby exchanged a look, one that spoke volumes. Well, Dobby drawled, cracking his neck. This should be fun. Izuku sighed dramatically, rolling his shoulders. Yeah, if your definition of fun includes babysitting a pyromaniac who has the stamina of a dying flashlight. Dobby snorted. Big talk for a kid in a hoodie. Izuku huffed. At least my hoodie is cleaner than you could ever be. Before either of them could say more, the thugs charged. Izuku moved first, dodging under a wild swing and flipping over one attacker, landing with precise ease before delivering a sharp roundhouse kick to another's head. The moment his foot connected, he was already twisting midair, grabbing the arm of another thug and using the momentum to flip him straight into the ground. Dobby let out a low whistle. Show off. Izuku barely spared him a glance as he ducked beneath another attack, jabbing his elbow into the thug's ribs before sweeping his legs out from under him. Oh, I'm sorry, he quipped. Would you rather I do this blindfolded? One of the thugs lunged with a knife. Izuku sidestepped effortlessly, twisting the man's wrist and yanking him forward, slamming him face-first into the brick wall. Another came at him with a pipe, and Izuku leapt onto a dumpster, using it as a springboard to launch himself up and over, landing gracefully behind the attacker. Before the thug could react, Izuku struck with a precise kick to the back of his knee, sending him crumpling to the ground. Dobby, meanwhile, was taking his time. He flicked his wrist, sending blue flames crackling toward a group of attackers, making them yelp and scramble backward. I am helping, he said lazily. Izuku landed a punch square in another thug's stomach and huffed. Setting one guy's sleeve on fire doesn't count. It's called intimidation. It's called being lazy. Izuku cartwheeled over another attacker, landing gracefully and throwing a smoke pellet at the ground, temporarily blinding 3 thugs. He reappeared from the shadows a second later, disarming one and twisting his arm behind his back before kicking him toward Dobby. Here, make yourself useful. Dobby sighed dramatically before knocking the thug out with a simple punch. You're lucky I tolerate you. Another thug tried to grab Izuku from behind, but he flipped over the man's shoulder, twisting midair and landing nimbly before delivering a sharp jab to his throat. The remaining attackers hesitated, eyeing the 2 of them warily. Wanna run now? Izuku asked, ping his head. Because, trust me, you're not winning this. A few of them took the hint and bolted, dragging their unconscious or groaning friends away. The ones who stayed quickly found themselves on the receiving end of Dobby's flames and Izuku's relentless attacks. Within minutes, the fight was over. Izuku straightened, brushing non-existent dust off his sleeves. That was fun. Dobby leaned against the alley wall, inspecting his nails like he hadn't just half-heartedly fought a gang. Not bad, kid. You sure you're not actually a villain? Izuku rolled his eyes. Nah, I'm just built different. It became routine, Dobby showing up half-dead, Izuku sighing in exaggerated exasperation, and the two of them bantering like an old married couple while Izuku played nurse. I swear, one day you're gonna set yourself on fire and I'm not gonna be around to put you out. That's what stop, drop, and roll is for. Izuku scoffed, pressing a disinfectant pad against a burn on Dobby's shoulder. The villain tensed with a sharp inhale. You do this on purpose, don't you? Dobby muttered. Izuku gave him an innocent look. Do what? Wait until I let my guard down and then hit me with the stingiest antiseptic you can find. I don't know what you're talking about. Dobby gave him a flat look. You enjoy my suffering. Izuku smirked. It's the highlight of my day. Despite their constant back and forth, Dobby kept coming back. At first, it was just for first aid. Then it was for the company. They never talked about it, neither of them were the sentimental type, but it was obvious. Sometimes, Dobby stuck around even when he wasn't injured, lounging on one of the old crates while Izuku tinkered with his gear or went over his patrol routes. One night, Dobby was flipping through an old book he'd found lying around while Izuku adjusted the straps on his utility belt. You ever gonna let me see what's under that mask? Dobby asked, not looking up from the pages. Izuku didn't even pause. I'll show you my face when you stop burning yourself every other night. Dobby snorted. So, never. Exactly. Figures. He finally glanced up at him, a smirk tugging at his lips. I bet you have a baby face under there. Izuku scoffed. And I bet you use eyeliner to make yourself look more intimidating. Dobby placed a hand over his chest, feigning offense. You wound me. You'll live. And that was the beginning of how a villain and a vigilante formed somewhat of a close bond. Meanwhile, Izuku had kept up his reputation as the most infuriating, effective, and successful vigilante Mizutafu had ever seen. For 8 months straight, he had evaded the heroes assigned to catch him. No matter how many times Eraserhead tried, Vidian always slipped through his grasp. Well, that wasn't entirely true. At this point, Izuku ran into Aizawa almost every night. Sometimes, it was intentional. Sometimes, it was just bad luck, or good luck, depending on who you asked. Regardless, these encounters always ended the same way: Aizawa scowling, Vidian laughing, and a fresh coat of glitter covering Japan's most exhausted pro-hero. Why do you keep doing this? Aizawa groaned, wiping pink glitter from his goggles. It's tradition now, Izuku said, as if that were obvious. Aizawa muttered something about his capture weapon, but Izuku had already vanished into the night. Despite his best efforts to remain indifferent, Aizawa found himself growing accustomed to Vidian's presence. The kid was competent, more so than most vigilantes Aizawa had encountered, and though he would never admit it, he had started to respect him just a little. And Nizu? Oh, Nizu was both delighted and utterly exasperated. The elusive vigilante was still a mystery, one that Nizu was determined to solve. The fact that he hadn't yet was driving him up the wall. The entire staff at UA lived in mild fear of Nizu's latest schemes, because a Nizu obsessed with something was never a good sign. Of course, Izuku's double life didn't stop at being a vigilante. The café was still running strong, and two of his most frequent customers were none other than Aizawa and Shinso. At first, it was just Shinso, dropping by for a quick cup of coffee before heading to school. Then Aizawa started showing up. Before long, it had become routine. Nearly every morning at ungodly hours, they came in, ordered the same drinks, and sat in their usual corner. Somehow, somewhere along the way, Shinso had become Izuku's best friend. You make the best coffee, Shinso grumbled one morning, practically inhaling his cup. I know, Izuku said smugly. Shinso gave him a side-eye. Humble, aren't you? Always. Aizawa, sitting across from them, sipped his coffee in exhausted silence, pointedly ignoring how familiar Izuku's sass sounded. It was ironic, really. Aizawa had spent months trying to capture Vidian, yet every morning he sat right across from him, completely unaware. Izuku, as always, found it hilarious. 3 months had passed, and somehow, despite all odds, despite their roles, despite the world, things had settled into a strange kind of balance. A vigilante and a villain had formed somewhat of a close bond. A pro-hero and a vigilante had formed an unspoken understanding. A tired teacher and a grumpy student unknowingly spent their mornings with one of the most infamous vigilantes in Japan. It was funny, really. And Nizu? Nizu still didn't know who Vidian was. All in all, things were going great. "You've got to be kidding me." Izuku groaned, dodging a swipe from Hawks. "Did you really have to bring Hawks into this?" Come on, Vidian," Hawks called back, keeping pace. "I feel hurt. Here I am, all excited to finally meet the #1 vigilante in Japan, and this is the welcome I get." "Take it as a compliment," Eraserhead grunted, launching his capture weapon. Izuku barely twisted out of the way, skidding against the rooftop's edge. "You've been a pain for too long. It's about time you got caught." Yeah, I get it, I'm an inconvenience to heroes," Izuku huffed, ducking low as Endeavor's flames surged toward him. He felt the heat brush against his side before rolling into a sprint again. "But you're not gonna catch me tonight, so I'd say you're all wasting your time." "I'd say you're overestimating yourself," Endeavor growled, keeping pace from below. His flames flickered dangerously, reflecting off the glass of nearby buildings. "You've evaded capture for too long. I mean, maybe if your detectives were actually competent, I wouldn't have to do their jobs for them," Izuku shot back. 6 years. 6 years, and you couldn't find that trafficking ring. And what do I do? Stumble on it by accident." He let out a mock gasp. "Maybe I should be the #1 hero instead." Endeavor's glare could have melted steel. "I hate to say it, but he's got a point," Hawks said, casually flipping midair as he avoided one of Izuku's smoke bombs. "You gotta admit, the kid's got style." "Thank you, Hawks, finally someone with taste." "You're still under arrest," Eraserhead reminded him dryly. Izuku sighed, shaking his head. "You guys just don't know when to quit, huh?" With a sudden burst of speed, he pivoted mid-run, flinging a small device at Hawks. The hero's sharp reflexes saved him from being tagged, but the brief distraction was all Izuku needed. He launched himself off the rooftop, twisting in the air before disappearing down into the alleyways. "Damn it," Eraserhead cursed, already moving to cut him off. "Come on, kid, slow down. You're making me work too hard here." Hawks called out, keeping pace with Izuku by using his feathers to propel himself forward. "I'm a very busy man, you know. Meetings, interviews, so many responsibilities. And here I am, running after a glitter-obsessed vigilante." Izuku scoffed mid-leap, twisting his body to dodge one of Aizawa's capture weapons. "Oh please, don't flatter yourself, Birdbrain. If you really had so many responsibilities, you wouldn't be wasting time chasing me." Hawks gasped in exaggerated offense. "Birdbrain? That hurts, dude." "And here I was, ready to offer you a job in the commission." Izuku snorted. "Gee, what a tempting offer. Join a corrupt government organization that probably wants to dissect me? Hard pass." Endeavor, who had been silently but steadily closing in, gritted his teeth. "Enough with the jokes. Surrender now, Vidian." Izuku flipped over a rooftop railing and shot him a cheeky grin. Sorry, firecracker, I'm allergic to getting arrested." Endeavor's flames flared dangerously. "Stop calling me that." Aizawa sighed heavily as he effortlessly swung from rooftop to rooftop, keeping an eye on the chase. "You do realize this only makes you look more guilty, right?" "Guilty of what?" "Doing your jobs for you?" Izuku quipped, sidestepping a jet of fire from Endeavor. "I mean, come on, it took you 6 years to find those traffickers." 6 years? I was out for a midnight stroll and found them by accident. That's embarrassing, my guy." Hawks whistled. "He's got a point, bossman." Endeavor shot Hawks an unamused glare. "You're not helping." Izuku took the chance to pivot sharply, launching himself off a ventilation and landing on a fire escape. He wasted no time sprinting up to gain more height. And another thing, how did Hawks get assigned to this? Was it really necessary to send the #3 after little ol' me? "#2 now," Hawks corrected with a smirk. And yeah, buddy, you've become kind of a big deal. Japan's top vigilante. Oh wait, I mean #1 vigilante evading capture for 8 months? That's gotta sting for the pros. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. You're enjoying this too much. Izuku grinned. Oh, way too much. Endeavor, growing impatient, sent a wall of fires surging toward him. Izuku's eyes widened as he barely managed to roll out of the way, the heat brushing against his heels. Geez, man, overkill much? What are you gonna do next? Drop a building on me? Aizawa let out another tired sigh. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised. Hawks laughed, casually flapping his wings to keep pace. Hey, look at the bright side, kid. If you let us catch you, you'll finally get a well-deserved rest. Izuku huffed. Oh sure, I'll get plenty of rest in jail. Details. Hawks waved him off. Seriously though, you're making us look bad. Can't you let us catch you just once? You know, for morale. Izuku rolled his eyes, jumping to another rooftop. Not my problem. Endeavor's flames surged again, but before he could launch another attack, Aizawa's capture weapon shot out, wrapping around Izuku's ankle midair. Izuku cursed under his breath, twisting in an attempt to free himself. Aizawa smirked. Got you. Did you though? Izuku shot back, reaching into his belt. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed a handful of small, spherical objects straight at the trio. Wait, oh no! Aizawa's eyes widened in horror. A split second later, boom! A massive, multicolored explosion erupted, coating everything in its radius with a thick layer of shimmering, neon glitter. Aizawa groaned as he wiped a handful of sparkling pink dust from his goggles. I hate you! Izuku cackled as he untangled himself and sprinted off. You should have seen this coming, old man. Hawks, still hovering in midair, blinked down at his now glitter-covered feathers. Okay, that's actually impressive. How do you even carry this much glitter? Endeavor, absolutely fuming, wiped golden specks from his mustache. Vidian. Izuku threw a salute over his shoulder. Better luck next time, firecracker. And with that, he disappeared into the night, leaving behind 3 very annoyed, very sparkly pro-heroes in his wake. Meanwhile, at the police headquarters, Tsukachi ran a hand down his face, groaning at the new pile of evidence Vidian had left behind. It wasn't adding up. We've tracked multiple aliases, locations, and habits, but nothing sticks. It's like he's creating a ghost. He turned to Nizu, who sat in his chair with steepled paws. Are you sure about this lead? Nizu nodded, eyes gleaming with excitement. Oh, absolutely. All the clues point to one individual. Vidian slipped up, and we have him now. The entire task force, made up of heroes and analysts, collectively sighed. It had been months of pursuing this elusive kid, and now Nizu, the supposed smartest being alive, was leading them to what they hoped would be the breakthrough they needed. 2 hours later. You've got to be kidding me. Tsukachi stood in front of an abandoned warehouse, staring at a crudely painted sign on the door that read, in bold green letters, Congrats. You played yourself. Love, Vidian. Nizu, covered in confetti and glitter from a well-placed prank mechanism, sat in stunned silence, gripping a folder full of completely fabricated information. Endeavor, still faintly shimmering from his earlier encounter, looked like he was about to explode with anger. This little. Hawks wheezed with laughter, slapping Aizawa on the back. Oh man. Nizu, buddy, this might be your worst moment yet. Aizawa, for his part, just closed his eyes and sighed. I need a nap. Nizu twitched in annoyance but maintained his calm facade, wiping a speck of confetti off his ear. I may have underestimated his strategic capabilities. Tsukachi groaned. That's an understatement. He turned to the group. This kid just made all of us chase a completely fake identity. And now the media thinks we're incompetent. Again. Izuku, watching the scene unfold through a hidden camera, grinned. And with that, Vidian disappeared into the night, leaving behind a city full of exhausted heroes, an annoyed yet impressed Nizu, an enraged Endeavor, a laughing Hawks, and Eraserhead rethinking his life decisions. The warehouse was quiet except for the occasional flickering of a faulty light bulb and the distant hum of traffic filtering in through the gaps in the rusted metal walls. The scent of damp concrete and aged wood filled the space, mixing with the faint aroma of burnt fabric from an old, discarded jacket in the corner. The place wasn't much, but for now, it was an in-between stop where shadows stretched long, and silence was an ever-present companion. Izuku perched on a stack of crates, one leg propped up as he absent-mindedly twirled a small knife between his fingers. The blade caught the dim light, flashing silver as it danced effortlessly over his knuckles before disappearing into his utility belt with a practiced motion. His free hand toyed with a loose thread on his sleeve, eyes distant as he listened to the night breathe through the cracks in the building. Then came the sound of boots against concrete, steady, deliberate, and unapologetically loud. Heavy footfalls that belonged to someone who had long since stopped caring about subtlety. Izuku didn't even look up. You know, he mused, tilting his head as the steps drew closer, for someone who loves playing with fire, you really aren't very sneaky. Dobby stepped into view, hands stuffed lazily into the pockets of his long coat, a smirk tugging at the corners of his scarred lips. Yeah, well, I figured you'd rather hear me coming than have me lurking in the shadows like some creep. Izuku rolled his eyes. I'd throw a knife at you if you tried. Dobby flopped onto the worn-out couch near the center of the room, the old cushions groaning in protest. He sprawled out, one arm draping over the back as he let out a dramatic sigh. And yet, somehow, I don't think that would actually stop me. Izuku smirked. No, but it'd make me feel better. He tossed a small rubber ball against the wall absent-mindedly. Dobby scoffed. You'd miss. Izuku raised a brow. Oh, wanna bet? Because I'd love a new pincushion. Dobby snorted. Try me, brat. Izuku grumbled as he watched Dobby rummaging through his bag, which looked like it had seen better days, as he pulled out a pack of chips. So, big shot now, huh? Number 1 pain in the neck for the heroes, you must be so proud. Yeah, totally. I always dreamed of being on Japan's most wanted list. Real honor. Dobby chuckled, stepping further into the warehouse. He had started coming here more often, enjoying the company though he'd never admit it out loud. Seriously though, how does it feel? All the heroes are obsessed with you now. I saw Endeavor on the news looking like he swallowed a lemon. Izuku grinned beneath his mask. A very sparkly lemon, you mean? Dobby huffed a laugh, shaking his head. Right. Your glitter bombs. Almost feel bad for them. Almost. Izuku shrugged, catching the ball midair before looking at Dobby. You're just jealous because you've never gotten the honor. Try it and see what happens, brat. Izuku only cackled. Noted. Dobby flopped onto the worn-out couch again, letting out a dramatic sigh. Still don't get why you keep patrolling the worst parts of Mizudafu. You don't have to. Izuku exhaled through his nose, tapping his fingers against his knee. Because someone has to. Dobby frowned slightly, watching Izuku as if trying to read something hidden behind his mask. He'd noticed before Izuku never really talked about why he did this. Sure, he had the skills, the intelligence, the drive, but there was something more there. Something deeper. He just didn't know what. Izuku's voice was quieter when he spoke again. Heroes don't patrol the abandoned parts of Mizudafu. Not because there aren't civilians there are. But there aren't any important people there, so they ignore it. Dobby's expression darkened slightly, but he said nothing. He understood that kind of neglect all too well. Instead of pushing, he let out a huff of laughter and smirked. You say that like you're some self-sacrificing hero. Izuku snorted. I say that like someone who knows how this city works. Dobby nodded, understanding unspoken between them. They both knew Mizudafu wasn't kind to those left behind. Dobby frowned slightly, watching him like he was trying to decipher something written in an unfamiliar language. You talk like it's a duty. Izuku's lips twitched in a smirk. I talk like someone who enjoys watching pro heroes lose sleep over a single sparkly vigilante. Dobby let out the low chuckle. You're ridiculous. A menace, actually. A moment passed before Izuku abruptly flicked a small, wrapped candy at Dobby's head. It bounced off his forehead and landed in his lap. Enough about me. What about you? Got anything interesting to share? Dobby rolled his eyes, unwrapping the candy and popping it into his mouth. Actually, got an invite. To what? Izuku asked, leaning forward with mock intrigue. A villain convention? Dobby rolled his eyes again. League of Villains. Izuku blinked. Twice. Then burst out laughing. Oh my god, League of Villains? Offensive. Getting invited to the League of Legends now, are we? I didn't know you were into video games. Dobby groaned, dragging a hand down his face. I hate you. Izuku cackled. You walked right into that one. Dobby rolled his eyes but couldn't hide his smirk. I should have known you'd make a joke out of it. Hey, in my defense, the name sounds like a gaming squad. What's next? The Overwatch of Villains? The Call of Criminals? Dobby groaned. Yeah, laugh it up. No, seriously, Izuku wheezed, wiping at a non-existent tear. What's next? Are they gonna have ranked matches? A leaderboard. Dobby snorted despite himself, shaking his head. You're such a nerd. And you just admitted to getting invited to the world's edgiest club. Dobby flicked the candy wrapper at him, and Izuku dodged it with a grin. Beneath the amusement, though, there was something else, something heavier. Izuku leaned forward slightly, the humor still in his voice, but his eyes held something more serious. So? You gonna join them? Dobby exhaled slowly, staring at the flickering light bulb overhead. Dunno. They've got some big plans, apparently. Shigaraki, the guy running the show, wants to shake things up. I just haven't decided yet. Izuku tilted his head. And? What's stopping you? Dobby shrugged. Dunno. I don't really do teams. Or orders. And something about the guy rubs me the wrong way. Izuku hummed. Maybe it's the murderous intent. Dobby snorted. Yeah, maybe. A beat passed, the humor fading slightly. Izuku watched him closely. You don't strike me as the take orders type. Dobby smirked, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Who says I'd follow orders? Izuku chuckled. Right, because you're so good at teamwork. Dobby flicked a small blue flame between his fingers, watching it dance. I don't know, brat. Maybe I just want to see where this all leads, Dobby said, a hint of curiosity in his voice. Izuku sighed. Well, whatever you decide. Just be careful. Dobby blinked, then smirked. What, worried about me, kid? Izuku huffed and rolled his eyes. Please. I just don't want to deal with the aftermath if you get yourself into trouble. Too much paperwork. Dobby chuckled. Relax. I can handle myself. Sure, Izuku drawled. Just remember, if you ever need to escape a situation, I know a place with a security system that works really well. Dobby groaned, shaking his head. You're insufferable. And you love it. A comfortable silence settled over them, filled with unspoken words. Dobby absent-mindedly flicked a small blue flame between his fingers, the light reflecting in his sharp eyes. Izuku watched, thoughtful. After a moment, Izuku smirked. You know, if you do join, I'll have to step up my game. Can't have you outshining me. Dobby barked out a laugh. Yeah, that I believe. Izuku tossed another candy at him. DMN right. The conference room in the underground hero base was filled with some of the top pro heroes in Japan, the air thick with tension and determination. Nizu sat at the head of the table, his beady eyes glinting with calculated amusement as he overlooked the gathered heroes. To his right was Detective Tsukachi, rubbing his temples as he scanned over the compiled reports and movement patterns of Japan's #1 and most infuriating vigilante Vidian. Across from them, Eraserhead leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, dark circles heavier than usual beneath his tired eyes. He had lost count of how many nights of sleep he had sacrificed chasing that kid, and it showed. The ABC building, Nizu finally spoke, tapping a clawed finger against the blueprint sprawled across the table. Based on Vidian's previous movements, as well as our predictive calculations, there's an 87% chance that he will stop by there tonight. Endeavor grunted, arms folded over his broad chest. Then we'll be waiting for him. He's gotten away too many times. Midnight smirked, twirling a strand of hair. Maybe this time, we should have some extra precautions. Glitterproof suits, perhaps? Present Mike snickered. Hey, don't joke. The last time he got me, I was sneezing sparkles for a week. Focus, Eraserhead muttered, rubbing his temples. We outnumber him this time. No slip-ups. We corner him, cut off his escape routes, and subdue him before he has the chance to vanish. Niza clapped his paws together. Precisely. If we execute this correctly, tonight will be the night we finally apprehend Vidian. Night had settled over Muzutafu, the ABC building standing tall against the dark sky. It was an older structure, partially abandoned, making it the perfect spot for someone like Vidian to pass through unnoticed. Unfortunately for him, this time, it wasn't unnoticed. Izuku crouched low on the rooftop, eyes scanning the quiet streets below. His instincts screamed at him that something was wrong. Too quiet, too still. Then the trap was sprung. Bright floodlights exploded to life, painting the rooftop in harsh white. The sound of boots hitting concrete filled the air as figures emerged from the shadows, closing in fast. Oh, fantastic. It's the Vidian Ruination Committee. Do you guys hold meetings about me or something? Izuku quipped, even as he launched into action. Eraserhead's capture weapon lashed out, and Izuku barely twisted out of the way in time, rolling to the side. He barely had a second to breathe before Midnight's whip cracked toward him from the left. He ducked, narrowly missing the strike, but Hawks was already moving. A flurry of sharp, feathered blades shot toward him, forcing Izuku into an erratic dodge. One feather grazed his thigh, making him wince, but he didn't stop. Seriously, Birdbrain? You're aiming for the legs? That's just rude. Hawks grinned from above, wings beating lazily. What can I say? Gotta keep you grounded somehow. Izuku twisted mid-step, yanking a smoke bomb from his belt and slamming it onto the ground. A thick, suffocating cloud exploded outward, obscuring vision. He darted forward, aiming for a break in their formation, but Present Mick's voice roared through the smoke. No escaping this time, Vidian. The sheer force of the sound wave sent Izuku skidding back, his ears ringing. He barely had time to register the capture weapon whipping toward him again. This time, it coiled around his wrist, yanking him off balance. Oh, come on, Eraser. I thought you liked my glitter bombs. I make you look fabulous. Eraserhead, deadpan as ever, tightened his grip. Not the word I'd use. Izuku twisted with the momentum, flipping midair and throwing a handful of flash pellets to the ground. Blinding bursts of light erupted, forcing Eraserhead to let go or risk being completely disoriented. The moment the grip on him loosened, Izuku yanked free and bolted. After him. Endeavor bellowed, flames roaring to life around his fists. Oh, wonderful and angry fireball. My favorite. Izuku sprinted toward the edge of the rooftop, every muscle screaming as he dodged another wave of feathers from Hawks. He twisted his body midair, narrowly avoiding a massive plume of fire from Endeavor, the heat grazing his arm. He dove off the building, grappling hook snapping forward to latch onto a distant ledge. And then pain exploded through his side. A sharp cry tore from his lips as something struck him midair. Hawks again, faster than he expected. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and for a terrifying moment, he plummeted. His grappling hook barely caught at the last second, swinging him harshly into the side of the building. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the burning pain in his ribs, and forced himself to keep moving. In it, Birdbrain, you got a personal vendetta against my ribs or something? He snapped, coughing as pain flared through his side. Hawks, still hovering effortlessly above, grinned. Just making sure you don't fly away too easily, buddy. Above him, Eraserhead had already recovered, his capture weapon snapping toward him like a coiled snake. Izuku barely twisted away, flipping midair to land on a ledge below. Before he could even take a breath, a wave of feathers shot toward him again. He ducked, rolling under the barrage, only for Midnight's gas to finally reach him. His vision wavered, limbs growing heavier with each breath. Oh, fantastic, he muttered, shaking his head violently. My favorite scent knockout perfume. He staggered, but he wasn't out yet. Clenching his teeth, he forced his body into motion, lungs burning as he kicked off the ledge and fired his grappling hook toward a distant fire escape. Just as he landed, a familiar voice rang through the night. "You're not slipping away this time, kid." Izuku had just enough time to brace before a powerful gust of wind slammed into him, knocking him off balance. Hawks swooped in for another strike, talons poised to grab him. "Okay, seriously? You have wings, I get it. No need to flex." Izuku barked, twisting at the last second and kicking off the wall to launch himself backward, narrowly dodging the grab. Hawks laughed, spinning midair. "Gotta admit, you're making this fun." "Glad one of us is enjoying it," Izuku muttered before launching another hook, swinging himself around the corner of the building just as Endeavor's flames roared behind him, scorching the edge of his cloak. The moment he landed, he threw down a glitter bomb, a final, shimmering insult to his pursuers. The explosion of sparkles coated the rooftop in a dazzling haze, forcing the heroes to falter. Coughing through the remnants of the gas and exhaustion weighing on his body, Izuku barely managed to vanish into the city shadows before they could close in. But not before throwing one last gesture over his shoulder, a solid, unmistakable sign aimed directly at Hawks. Hawks let out a bark of laughter, shaking glitter out of his feathers. "Then, kid, you really know how to make an exit." Eraserhead, deadpan as ever, just sighed. "I can't believe that kid." Somehow, miraculously, he slipped through their fingers. But not without a cost. By the time he stumbled into the warehouse, the adrenaline was fading, and the pain was settling in. Blood dripped from his arm, his ribs ached with every breath, and his vision swam dangerously. Dobby was there, sitting on the couch, lazily tossing a small flame between his fingers. His sharp eyes snapped up the second Izuku staggered inside. "What happened to you?" Dobby exclaimed, pushing to his feet. Izuku managed a weak chuckle, swaying slightly. "Heroes. Overkill. I barely got out." Dobby caught him just as his knees buckled, hoisting him up with a grumble. "They went full force on a single kid?" Izuku winced when Dobby pressed a hand against his wounded shoulder. "I'll watch it. Sit down before you fall over." With a dramatic sigh, Dobby lowered Izuku onto the couch, rolling his eyes as he rummaged through an old first aid kit. "You really have a death wish?" Izuku smirked, breath hitching. "What can I say? Keeps life interesting." Dobby snorted, grabbing a cloth and dabbing at the wound with more force than necessary. "Yeah. Well, interesting is a lot less fun when you're half dead." "And for what? What were they thinking, going so hard on you? You're not even a villain, you're cleaning up their mess." "And their genius response?" "Oh yeah, let's hurt the kid who's doing our jobs for us." Izuku chuckled weakly. "Sounds like you're mad for me." Dobby scowled. "I'm mad because it's ridiculous. Next time, you better get out of there before they really hurt you." Izuku let his head fall back, exhaustion weighing heavy. His breathing was labored, each inhale growing more difficult. Dobby narrowed his eyes, suddenly noticing the problem. The mask. His fingers hesitated over the edges before muttering, "Don't pass out on me." Izuku smirked, breath hitching. "Ah, Dabs, I didn't know you cared." Dobby rolled his eyes at the nickname. "Shut up before I let you pass out." Then, Izuku's breath hitched, his mask still on. "Don't pass out on me," Dobby muttered, yanking it off. Dobby's eyes widened. What the heck? He wasn't sure what he had expected. But it sure wasn't a kid. Dobby froze, staring at the too young face beneath the mask. Freckles dusted across pale skin, green hair damp with sweat. He looked 14. Just a kid. "What the heck?" Dobby muttered again under his breath, running a hand down his face, now standing over him, arms crossed, looking entirely unimpressed. "Well," Dobby drawled, arching a brow. "Got anything you want to explain?" Izuku groaned, letting his head fall back against the couch. Izuku groaned, carefully shifting as he forced himself into a sitting position on the battered old couch. His side throbbed, but he ignored it, focusing instead on his discarded mask lying on the floor. Without it, he felt exposed, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had control of the situation. Across from him, Dobby lounged on the armrest of a chair like he owned the place, arms crossed, one leg draped lazily over the other. His piercing blue eyes gleamed with something unreadable curiosity, amusement, maybe even a hint of respect. "All right, kid," Dobby drawled, tilting his head. "What kind of protagonist energy do you have?" He dragged a hand down his face. "Seriously, I need to know. How did a scrawny brat like you manage to run circles around half the pro-hero force in Japan? Or am I just supposed to assume you're some kind of divine punishment sent to ruin their careers?" Izuku coughed, grimacing as pain flared through his ribs. "Trade secret." Dobby scowled, grabbing a roll of bandages and crouching down next to him. "Trade secret? You just got your butt kicked by a bunch of adults and somehow still managed to flip them off before escaping. You know how insane that is." Izuku snorted weakly. "It's called style, Dobby." "Style my foot." Dobby huffed, applying antiseptic a little too harshly on a gash on Izuku's shoulder, smirking when the kid hissed. "If I wasn't seeing this with my own two eyes, I'd call nonsense. But here you are, a walking disaster, and somehow you a kid have the entire hero network losing sleep." Izuku sighed, tilting his head back against the couch. "They should be thanking me, really. I'm making their jobs easier." Dobby let out a bark of laughter. "You're making their lives miserable, and you know it. Are you going to give me a real answer now, brat?" Izuku exhaled sharply and rolled his shoulders, working through the ache. "It's not that complicated. They rely too much on their quirks, so I take advantage of that. Planning helps too. A lot of planning. I know their patrol schedules, their habits, their weaknesses. Half of them don't know what to do when they're up against someone who actually thinks." Dobby let out a low whistle. "DMN. No wonder they're losing their minds." Izuku huffed a tired laugh. "Oh, they are. Pretty sure Eraserhead wants to strangle me." "You did glitter bomb him. Twice. Probably more. He deserved it." Dobby barked out a laugh. "You've got some guts, I'll give you that. But you look terrible." "Well, thanks. I feel so much better now," Izuku deadpanned. Dobby snorted before looking at him seriously. "So, got a real name, or do I just keep calling you Vidian?" Izuku hesitated for a second before deciding to go for it. If Dobby had wanted him dead, he would have let him bleed out by now. "Izuku." Dobby raised a brow. "Huh." Izuku tilted his head. "What?" Dobby smirked. "Didn't expect you to be a Izuku." "And what does a Izuku look like?" "Not a gremlin vigilante with a death wish, that's for sure." Izuku groaned. "I do not have a death wish. You ran into a hero ambush by yourself." Izuku huffed. "It was calculated." "Yeah. Well, you miscalculated." Izuku scowled and Dobby grinned. "Seriously though, you look like you picked a fight with a woodchipper and lost." Dobby said with an annoying grin on his face. "I didn't lose. But got a little roughed up." Dobby raised an eyebrow. "A little? Kid, you look like you went 12 rounds with a Nomu and then got hit by a bus." Izuku sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Look, I can take care of myself." Dobby's smirk widened. "Oh yeah? Because from where I'm sitting, you're about 2 steps away from passing out." "I'm fine." "You're full of it." Izuku narrowed his eyes. "And you're full of hot air. What's your point?" Dobby snorted. "My point is, you're staying here until you're patched up." Izuku crossed his arms. "And if I say no? Then I'll sit on you and make sure you don't move until you heal," Dobby deadpanned. "And I don't think you want that." Izuku scoffed. "You wouldn't." Dobby's grin turned downright wicked. "Oh, I absolutely would. And let's be real, you wouldn't even be able to fight me off right now." Izuku muttered something about insufferable, smug fire hazards, but he knew Dobby had a point. Much as it irritated him to admit it, resting was probably the best option. With a resigned sigh, he leaned back against the couch. "Fine. But I'm not calling you Nurse Dobby." Dobby grinned. "DMN. And here I was looking forward to that. What about Dr. Hot Hands?" Izuku groaned. "I hate you." "Nah, you love me. Now shut up and rest before I actually make you." The heroes were going to lose their minds. Aizawa, Endeavor, And even Hawks had been searching for any trace of Vidian after he'd barely escaped their last ambush. But now, he had seemingly vanished. Tsukachi ran a hand through his hair, sighing. If he's injured, he wouldn't have just disappeared. Aizawa sighed, drinking his 16th cup of coffee. If the brat was smart, he would keep his profile down for a few more days. Meanwhile, the League of Villains was starting to take an interest in Vidian. If the heroes were this desperate to catch him, then maybe, just maybe, he was worth their attention too. Because if the heroes were desperate enough to waste this many resources on him, that meant they thought he was a threat. And if they thought that, then he had potential. A lot of it. Shigaraki tapped his fingers against his desk, deep in thought. For a bunch of so-called heroes, they sure are obsessed with this kid. Makes you wonder what they're so scared of. I think it's pretty obvious. Toga piped up, twirling a knife between her fingers. He's dangerous. Smart. Sneaky. And he's annoying them, which makes him super fun. I want to meet him. Twice clapped his hands together. He's a ghost. A shadow. A menace. The kid. A nightmare wrapped in a hoodie. We need him on our side. No, we need to destroy him. No, wait, the first idea was better. No, the first idea is trash. Compress hummed, adjusting his hat. If he's evading heroes this effectively, imagine what he could do with proper support. We could make use of someone like that. We should tell Dobby. Toga added, the knife between her fingers now twirling dangerously fast. So he can give his opinion. Shigaraki scratched his neck. Fine. Then let's keep watching and wait. As for Dobby, well, he had his own way of making his displeasure known. That was why, the next morning, heroes across the city woke up to an unfortunate discovery. Glitter. Everywhere. Endeavor's agency? Glitter bombed. The police station? Covered in sparkly chaos. Even the hero billboards were shimmering. In the center of it all was a giant, spray-painted message. The heroes can isekai Vidian's butt. Dobby grinned as he admired his work. Let's see how they like that. As for Hawks, he was having a crisis. After reflecting on the situation, he concluded that they had made a mistake. If they continued to push Vidian like this, they would drive him straight into the hands of villains. So, he decided to take a risk. He went to find the kid himself. Unsure of what he would say, maybe an apology, maybe an offer he knew he needed to ensure Vidian didn't completely turn against them. After a long, tiring search, Hawks finally found Vidian perched on a rooftop, gazing out over the city. He could sense the kid's tension from a distance, ready for a fight or a quick escape at any moment. With a deep breath, Hawks stepped forward, his wings fluttering lightly behind him. He raised his hands in a non-threatening gesture. I'm not here to fight, all right? Hawks called out, his voice quieter and less cocky than usual. I just want to talk. Vidian's stance shifted, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the man before him. You've got a lot of nerve showing up after everything, Hawks. What do you want? Hawks winced at the harshness in Vidian's tone, but he stood his ground. Look, I know I messed up. I shouldn't have hurt you. But I'm not asking for your forgiveness, just a chance to explain myself. Vidian crossed his arms, clearly on edge but not running away. You hurt me, so I'm just supposed to. Listen. Hawks took a step closer, his wings shifting in the breeze. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But you're more than just a problem for the heroes, Vidian. You're someone I respect whether you like it or not. There was a tense silence before Vidian spoke again, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Wow, Birdbrain. You really know how to make an apology sound convincing. Hawks chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. Yeah, I get it. This isn't easy. But I owe you that much. I'm not here to make excuses, just to make it right. Vidian let out a long sigh, as if weighing his options. His eyes softened for just a moment, the anger giving way to something more guarded. You want forgiveness? Fine. But it doesn't mean I'll forget. Heroes don't get a pass just because they say, sorry. Hawks nodded, his face serious now. I wouldn't expect you to. I just wanted to say it. There was another long pause before Vidian gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a sign that he was willing to move on but not without holding on to that caution, that wariness. Alright Hawks. Apology accepted. Just don't expect me to go easy on you next time. Hawks smirked, his wings fluttering behind him. I don't expect anything less from the #1 vigilante in Japan. Meanwhile, at a certain café, another disaster was brewing. Izuku sighed, wiping down the counter, already exhausted from all the events that had happened throughout the day. He was close to just locking the doors early and calling it a day. And then the door slammed open. I knew it. Izuku blinked. There, standing in the doorway, looking equal parts furious and smug, was Katsuki Bakugo. Oh, Izuku muttered. This is not good. Bakugo stomped forward, pointing a finger at him. I knew there was no way some nerd like you just disappeared. You've been here this whole time? Izuku considered lying. He really did. But at this point, what was the use? Yeah. Bakugo growled. You little. A hand landed on his shoulder. Bakugo froze. Don't scare. Favorite. Barista. Slowly, Bakugo turned his head. There, standing behind him, arms crossed and expression serious, was Aizawa Shoyuda. Great. Izuku sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. This is going to be a long day. The tension in the cafe was palpable. Bakugo stood frozen, every muscle in his body tense as if he had just walked into an uncomfortable situation. Aizawa Shoyuda stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes half-lidded yet somehow more intimidating than any villain Bakugo had ever faced. Don't scare. Favorite. Barista. Bakugo turned his head slightly, giving Aizawa a mix of disbelief and barely contained frustration. What are you doing here? Aizawa raised an eyebrow. Drinking coffee. Izuku bit his lip to suppress a laugh. This was already the most entertaining part of his shift. Bakugo scowled, his fists clenching as he gestured wildly. You've got to be kidding me. First the nerd, now some random guy. Wait, hold on, you're Eraserhead? He stepped back, his eyes darting between Aizawa's scruffy appearance and the pro-hero's usual deadpan stare. What happened to you? Lose your job? End up living in a dumpster? Why do you look like that? Aizawa took a slow sip of his coffee, unfazed. I choose to look like this. Bakugo's eye twitched. Whatever. First the nerd, now a pro-hero? What is this, some kind of joke? You working here, Eraserhead? You a barista now? Aizawa tilted his head slightly. Nope. Just making sure my favorite barista isn't being bothered. Bakugo twitched, his frustration growing. I'm not bothering anyone. I'm just... He threw his hands in the air, sparks flickering around his palms. Forget it. This place is a circus. Aizawa's eyes narrowed slightly. Then leave. Bakugo stiffened, his pride battling with his instincts. For a moment, it looked like he might actually explode. Then, with a final huff, he spun on his heel and stomped out, the door slamming shut behind him with a force that rattled the windows. You haven't seen the last of me, Deku. Bakugo shouted as he left, always needing to have the final word. Once he was gone, Izuku finally let himself chuckle. That went well. Aizawa sighed and settled into his usual seat at the counter. The kid's got a temper. Izuku grinned, already moving to prepare Aizawa's usual order. Even though John was still on vacation, Izuku had memorized every regular's favorite drinks and Aizawa was no exception. You really do come here a lot, Izuku remarked as he worked. Not that I'm complaining, but you know, you're a pro-hero. You've got meetings, patrols, and students to deal with. Aizawa gave him a flat look. You are the only acceptable barista now. Izuku rolled his eyes but smiled. The irony amused him. Aizawa, one of the most relentless heroes chasing after Vidian, had no idea that the troublemaker who had glitter-bombed him countless times was the same person making his coffee every morning. Even Nizu hadn't figured it out yet, and that was honestly Izuku's proudest achievement. Just as Aizawa took his first sip of coffee, the bell above the door chimed again. Izuku didn't have to turn around to recognize the familiar presence that had just entered. Welcome back, Hitoshi. Hitoshi Shinso, another one of Izuku's regulars and arguably his best friend, approached the counter with his usual tired expression. Hey! Izuku wasted no time making Shinso's usual drink, handing it over as Shinso slid into the seat next to Aizawa. He took a sip, sighed, and visibly relaxed. "You are a lifesaver." Izuku smirked. "I know. Bow before my greatness." Shinso gave him a deadpan look. "Not happening." "Come on," Izuku teased, leaning on the counter. "I fuel your entire existence at this point." Shinso took another sip, pretending to think it over. "True. But I think that just makes you my coffee minion." Aizawa observed their banter, looking vaguely amused. "I can't tell if this is an argument or just friendly banter." Shinso nearly choked on his coffee, while Izuku looked mockingly offended. "Gross, Aizawa. That's my best friend." Aizawa shrugged, sipping his coffee without remorse. The three of them fell into easy conversation, trading jabs and commentary about their day. It was a routine Izuku had grown to appreciate, an escape from the chaos of his double life. But, of course, the world never let him rest for long. Later that night, Aizawa left the cafe with an extra cup of black coffee in hand, making his way to the police station. Tsukachi looked far more worn out than the last time Aizawa had seen him. His hair was a mess, his shirt wrinkled, and dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept in days. "You look terrible," Aizawa remarked, dropping into the chair across from him. Tsukachi groaned, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Thanks, I was really hoping for that extra boost to my self-esteem." Aizawa slid a cup of coffee toward him. Tsukachi took a sip and promptly froze, his eyes widening. "This is the best coffee I've ever had," he whispered, staring at the cup as if it held the secrets of the universe. Aizawa smirked, enjoying the moment. "Figured you could use it." Tsukachi scowled, suddenly bristling. "And you've been keeping this to yourself? You selfish, sleep-deprived JRK." Aizawa shrugged, completely unfazed. "Gatekeeping builds character." Tsukachi shot him a glare before sighing and rubbing his temples. "Anyway, we've still got almost nothing on Vidian." Aizawa leaned forward, intrigued. Still. All we've confirmed is that he's male." Aizawa frowned. "So no leads?" Tsukachi sighed heavily. "No leads." As he took another sip of coffee, a new resolution formed in Aizawa's mind. He was going to that cafe every morning from now on. Meanwhile, in a less reputable part of town, the League of Villains was holding a meeting. "So," Shigaraki drawled, tapping his fingers against the table. "Are we going after Vidian or not?" The room fell silent as the others awaited Dobby's input. Toga tilted her head. "I think he's cute. And strong. I want to meet him." Twice nodded rapidly. "He's amazing." "He's awful." "No, wait, he's definitely amazing." Compress hummed. "He's certainly resourceful." Shigaraki sighed, scratching his neck. "Dobby?" Dobby took his time answering, leaning back with arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "No." Toga pouted. Why not?" Dobby's jaw tightened, and his smirk was more of a warning than amusement. "Because if you really think about it, we don't want Vidian on our bad side." Shigaraki frowned. "Explain." Dobby exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. "Heroes are desperate to catch this kid. If Nizu is interested, that means Vidian is smarter than we realize. He's been outmaneuvering half of Japan's heroes for months. And on top of that, the guy specializes in misdirection and chaos." His voice dropped slightly, leaving no room for argument. "And if you think I'm letting any of you drag him into our mess, you've lost your minds." Toga blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, Dobby, do you know him?" Dobby's eyes flashed with intensity. "Doesn't matter." Shigaraki narrowed his gaze. "You're acting like it does." Dobby let out a dry chuckle, tilting his head. "You want to test that theory?" Silence filled the air. The League knew Dobby wasn't one for empty threats. "Dimon," Toga murmured, impressed. Shigaraki huffed but chose not to press further. "Fine. We wait." Dobby smirked, satisfied. He wasn't sure why, but he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't letting these unpredictable individuals anywhere near his little brother figure. And if they tried? Well, they would soon discover why angering big brothers was a mistake. Somewhere across the city, completely unaware, Izuku Midoriya sneezed. Things were not going great. Izuku was currently being pursued by not one, not two, but three pro-heroes: Endeavor, Eraserhead, and Hawks. Of course, the universe seemed intent on making his life difficult. He vaulted over a rooftop, flipping midair before landing smoothly on the next building. A sharp gust of wind signaled Hawks closing in, his wings slicing through the night air. Below, Endeavor's flames illuminated the streets, and Eraserhead had his capture weapon at the ready. It felt like being hunted by the three worst possible opponents in a high-speed chase. How they had managed to get Hawks involved in this whole mess, Izuku wasn't sure. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that he was now officially recognized as the #1 vigilante in Japan. The media wouldn't stop talking about it, after all. Flashback. It all started last night when Vidian accidentally stumbled upon one of the biggest child trafficking rings in Japan, one that the heroes had failed to locate for 6 years, leaving it a cold case. In true Vidian fashion, he had taken it down all by himself. The children were freed from that terrible place, and every single villain involved was neatly tied up, ready for the authorities to collect, complete with a note that read, "You heroes SEK." Figuratively. Apparently, the media got hold of this information, and the public went wild. They praised Vidian, calling him the #1 vigilante in Japan. Unfortunately, his heroic act had also resulted in half of Japan's hero force deciding that he needed to be caught immediately. That was probably what got Hawks assigned to his case in the first place. Flashback end. I'm seriously impressed with myself for keeping up my schedule and updating constantly for 10 days straight. If you told me this a year ago, I would have looked at you like you were from another planet. Thank you to everyone for sticking around, both new readers and those who have been here from the very beginning. Enjoy the story. Have you heard about the earthquake that happened in Myanmar and Thailand? I find it interesting because Thailand has a very slim chance of experiencing earthquakes, yet it happened for the first time in many years. I know what it feels like to be in an earthquake, as I experienced one in a country I won't name a few years ago. It was absolutely terrifying. Fortunately, it was only a magnitude of 4.5, and there wasn't much damage. Fun fact, I thought I was dizzy because the ground felt like it was shaking. I need help. I need ideas for the next chapter. My brain isn't coming up with anything decent right now, and coffee isn't helping. I might need a day or two to come up with a good plotline, so if you have any interesting ideas, feel free to share them, and I might use them. But yes, the next chapter is definitely coming out soon, so have a good day. After a couple of cups of coffee and some time spent binge-watching videos, I finally present to you the next chapter. Thanks 1,000 to those who provided amazing ideas for this chapter. I hope you enjoy it. I love listening to music, who doesn't? I was on the subway this morning and it was a long trip, so I opened my favorite playlist on Spotify. Before I knew it, I was already at my destination. I guess having fun makes time fly. What's your favorite music genre? Mine is pop and rock. So, if you're wondering about the timeline, right now Izuku and Bakugo are in their second term of junior high and currently on summer break. In case you don't know, the timeline for this story started with Izuku Midoriya as a 14-year-old in his second year of middle school, and at this point, it is summer break. Just pretend that summer break lasts a year. Also, I haven't checked the grammar thoroughly in this chapter, so if you see any errors, feel free to correct me. It was supposed to be a normal morning shift. Izuku Midoriya had thought, perhaps naively, that today would be just like any other. He would open the café, serve coffee to the regulars, exchange playful banter with Shinso if he arrived early, and enjoy the peaceful routine of his double life. That fragile illusion shattered the moment Tsukachi Naomasa strode through the door, his keen eyes scanning the room like a hawk surveying its surroundings. Izuku barely managed to suppress a gasp. His fingers twitched around the rag he had been using to wipe down the counter, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios at lightning speed. Oh, this was bad. Then, almost instinctively, his lips curled into a smirk, masking the momentary panic with practiced ease. Well, this is a surprise, Izuku said smoothly, casually reaching for a cup as if he hadn't just experienced a mini heart attack. Welcome. What can I get you? Tsukachi let out a long, world-weary sigh, the kind that spoke of sleepless nights and burdens too heavy to bear alone. But there was something else in his expression, a glimmer of expectation, of appreciation, that didn't go unnoticed. "Black coffee," Tsukachi said, his voice tinged with exhaustion yet firm. "The same one Aizawa brought me." Izuku chuckled, his movements fluid as he began the familiar ritual of brewing the perfect cup. Aizawa? So the great detective has fallen victim to my superior brewing skills. You wouldn't be the first. I don't know what kind of magic you put in that cup, Tsukachi admitted, leaning against the counter and watching Izuku work with a kind of reverence one might reserve for a master craftsman. But that coffee saved my soul. A smirk tugged at the corner of Izuku's lips as he placed the steaming mug in front of the detective. "Enjoy." Tsukachi took a slow, deliberate sip, and Izuku swore he could see the tension bleed from the man's shoulders, his entire being seemingly melting into a rare moment of peace. If Tsukachi were any less composed, he might have let out an audible sigh of satisfaction. Instead, he settled for a long, contented breath. "This," he murmured, staring down at the cup as though it contained the very secrets of the universe, "is the only thing keeping me sane." Izuku leaned forward, resting his elbow on the counter, emerald eyes gleaming with mischief. "So, should I be worried that a detective is in my cafe?" Tsukachi raised an eyebrow over the rim of his cup. "Should you?" A slow, amused hum escaped Izuku's throat, but he didn't push further. Instead, the two fell into an easy conversation, filled with wry humor and subtle observations. By the time Tsukachi finally left, there was no doubt in Izuku's mind that he would be back. Well, that was a close one. But surely, the rest of the day would be normal, right? Later that afternoon, Izuku found himself staring at a poster pinned to a lamppost. A brand new amusement park had just opened nearby, boasting thrilling rides, fun attractions, and most importantly a balloon popping stall. Izuku's eyes gleamed. It had been way too long since he'd done something like this, just going out, blending into the crowd, and enjoying himself without the weight of his double life pressing down on him. And today? He actually had the time for it. No cafe shift, no vigilante work, no urgent emergencies to handle. Of course, there was the minor detail of the League being up to something villainous today. Normally, that meant Izuku would be planning, plotting, and executing a way to foil their schemes as Vidian. But this was the real kicker. He'd made a bet with Dobby last night. A bet he should have won, except Dobby was an absolute menace at poker. The price of losing? He had to let one League of Villains plan go unchallenged. Just one. Dobby had grinned smugly as he laid down his winning hand, practically preening as Izuku groaned in frustration. "Face it, kid," Dobby had said, lazily shuffling the deck. "You're good at a lot of things, but luck ain't one of 'em." Izuku scowled. "You cheated. You're just a sore loser, brat." So, here he was, begrudgingly keeping his word and letting one of their schemes slide. He had no idea what they were doing, something about an arms deal? A bank heist? Who knew? He'd find out later and deal with it then. For now, amusement park it was. Izuku grabbed his wig and contacts and put them on. What could go wrong? Apparently, everything if you were Izuku Midoriya. At first, everything went smoothly. The park was vibrant, bustling with life, the scent of fried food and sweet treats lingering in the air. Laughter and excited screams from roller coasters echoed around him, and Izuku, dressed casually in his civilian clothes, blended seamlessly into the crowd. No one paid him any mind as he wandered from stall to stall, sampling snacks, admiring the rides, and soaking in the rare moment of normalcy. Then, just as he reached one of the balloon-popping stalls, his luck took a drastic and absolutely catastrophic turn for the worse. Because standing at the stall, casually chatting amongst themselves, were Hawks, Mirko, Best Jeanist, and Endeavor. Izuku came to a dead stop. "What on earth are they doing here?" he whispered to himself, his heart racing. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to leave. He turned on his heel, intending to escape before something disastrous happened, and promptly ran face-first into a very familiar wall of authority. A wall known as Midnight, Present Mike, and Aizawa Shoyu. The universe hated him. It had to. There was no other explanation for this level of karmic punishment, letting him run into some of the most powerful heroes in Japan. Izuku's mind went into immediate overdrive. His instincts roared, his body tensed, but at least he was in civilian clothes. They had no reason to suspect him. He just had to act natural, blend in, and, "Hey kid." Izuku stiffened, slowly turning his head. Hawks was grinning at him. "Oh no. Hawks, be gentle on the poor kid," Mirko exclaimed, grinning widely. Endeavor grumbled as he watched Hawks drag Izuku toward the nearest balloon-popping stall. Unfortunately for Izuku, years of training and months of vigilantism had given him a level of accuracy that was almost inhuman. So, when he took up the toy rifle at the balloon-popping stall, he effortlessly shot down every single target with pinpoint precision. The stall owner's jaw practically hit the floor. The pro heroes? They were speechless. Hawks let out a low whistle, golden eyes alight with interest. "Demon Kid. That was smooth." Mirko, ever the battle enthusiast, cracked her knuckles with an approving nod. "That was some serious precision. Have you ever thought about hero work?" Izuku laughed nervously, setting the toy gun down as casually as he could manage. "Oh, no. A lot of practice, I guess?" Aizawa, ever the analytical one, narrowed his eyes slightly. His gaze, sharp and calculating, lingered on Izuku just a little too long for comfort. That level of accuracy isn't common. Izuku internally panicked. "Oh no." Hawks, meanwhile, looked far too entertained. "You ever play darts, kid?" Izuku waved his hands quickly, trying to deflect. "Oh no, We should totally test this," Hawks interrupted, a mischievous glint in his eye. "You've got the aim of a sharpshooter. Bet you could dominate every carnival game here." Izuku groaned. Why is this happening? Taking a slow, measured breath, Izuku forced himself to shrink slightly, shoulders curving inward as if he were a shy, awkward teenager overwhelmed by the presence of top pro heroes. He even made sure to stutter a little when he answered questions, keeping his voice just the right amount of nervous to seem believable. It worked. Too well. Hawks, unfortunately, took it upon himself to be as annoyingly friendly as possible, ruffling Izuku's hair at least twice while laughing about his hidden talent. Mirko kept trying to challenge him to reaction-based games, claiming that if he wasn't aiming to be a hero, he should at least consider competitive sports. Aizawa, on the other hand, was watching him like a hawk worse than Hawks himself. The trick was simple: blend in. Act normal. Don't do anything remotely impressive. Unfortunately, that plan had already been completely and utterly obliterated. "So, kid, you got a name?" Hawks asked, his sharp golden eyes twinkling with amusement. Izuku faked a small, hesitant smile. Mikumo," he blurted. Aizawa hummed, clearly making a mental note of that. "Oh no. Mikumo, huh? Pretty fitting," Hawks mused. "You sure you're not secretly in a hero course somewhere?" Izuku let out an awkward chuckle. "No, sir. I just play a lot of these games." Best Jeanist tilted his head, suspicious but saying nothing. "All right. Time to execute a smooth exit." Izuku subtly glanced at the crowd. The trick wasn't to run, but to fade away. Hawks was too fast for him to make a break for it, and Aizawa would react immediately if he sensed anything off. No, Izuku needed to be boring, so uninteresting that no one would feel the need to keep their eyes on him. He waited for the perfect moment. Hawks got distracted by Mirko daring him to a basketball shooting contest. Aizawa turned slightly when Present Mike yelled about some new high score he'd broken. Best Jeanist was politely listening to midnight. Izuku exhaled. Then, without a sound, he stepped back. Then another step. He smoothly blended into the moving crowd, slipping behind a group of excited kids. Then he adjusted his posture, straightened his hoodie, and casually walked away. No rush. No panic. Just a normal teenager making his way through an amusement park. It wasn't until a solid 3 minutes later that Hawks suddenly paused mid-throw, his eyes widening. Wait a second. All heads turned toward the empty space where Izuku should have been. A beat of silence. Did that kid just vanish? Present Mike practically exclaimed. Aizawa pinched the bridge of his nose. I knew something was off. Mirko burst out laughing. Holy crap, he played us. Hawks groaned, dragging a hand down his face. Unbelievable. He was right there. Best Jeanist hummed. An expert at evasion, it seems. Aizawa scowled. I don't like it. Hawks let out an exasperated laugh. You know what? I kinda respect it. Izuku smirked to himself as he slipped into the warehouse, taking off his contacts and wig, shaking off the lingering adrenaline from his perfectly executed escape. He was about to grab some water when the door creaked open. Dobby strolled in, hands in his pockets, his usual smirk firmly in place. Sue, Dobby drawled. Anything interesting happen today? Izuku stiffened. Nope. Dobby raised an eyebrow, then casually tossed his phone onto the table. The screen displayed an extremely blurry, but to Izuku, a very obvious image of him standing next to several pro heroes at the amusement park. Really? Dobby grinned. Because the news seems to think you had a fun little outing with Japan's top heroes. Izuku groaned, rubbing his face. I was trying to have a normal day. Dobby laughed. And yet, you managed to end up on a playdate with half the hero commission. I don't know whether to be impressed or concerned. They dragged me into it. Izuku protested. Dobby shook his head, clearly enjoying himself. And you just let them? I had to fake being a normal kid. Izuku shot back. Do you know how hard that is? Dobby leaned against the wall, smirking. I bet they're still trying to figure out where you went. Izuku let out a suffering sigh, flopping onto the couch. Hawks is never gonna let this go, is he? Dobby laughed again. Oh, absolutely not. Izuku groaned once more. He was never going to hear the end of this. Dobby chuckled. At least you had your contacts and wig, brat. It could have been worse. And after a moment of silence, Izuku peeked up from where he was sprawled on the couch, narrowing his eyes at Dobby. By the way, what exactly were you doing during that league operation I had to ignore? Dobby's smirk didn't waver. Oh, curious now, are we? Izuku crossed his arms. Considering I lost a bet and had to let it happen? I think I deserve to know. Dobby just smirked. Izuku Midoriya stared at Dobby, utterly astonished. You did what? He exclaimed, his eye twitching slightly as Dobby leaned casually against the warehouse wall, appearing completely unfazed. I broke into UA and took some files on All Might. You know, just typical villain stuff, Dobby replied, inspecting his nails as if this were an everyday occurrence which, in hindsight, it kind of was. Izuku ran a hand down his face, groaning. You broke into UA? The most heavily secured hero school in the country? That UA? Yeah, don't be so dramatic, Dobby waved him off lazily. We were in and out before those heroes even knew what hit them. But there's a problem. I need a favor. A favor? Izuku repeated warily, already dreading what was to come. Dobby smirked, pulling out a thick folder and dropping it onto the rickety table in front of Izuku. It's encrypted. Looks like some fancy safety precaution from their principal. And guess what? You're the only one I know who might be able to crack it. Izuku narrowed his eyes, crossing his arms. And what makes you think I'd help you with this? Dobby's smirk widened. Because you're curious. Don't even try to deny it. Izuku opened his mouth to argue but promptly shut it. Dobby wasn't wrong. Flashback. The League of Villains huddled around a makeshift table in their dimly lit underground hideout. The air buzzed with tension as Tamura Shigaraki flipped through the stolen files, his scowl deepening with each page. None of this makes sense, he growled, holding up a page filled with strange symbols and incomprehensible glyphs. The characters danced like an optical illusion, maddening in their complexity. Spinner leaned over his shoulder, squinting. You sure it's not just in some obscure language? It's encrypted, Kurogyri said evenly, swirling with calm discontent. And very well, I might add. This reeks of Nise's handiwork. The file is useless to us like this. Toga sighed dramatically, flopping into a chair with a pout. I was really hoping for some juicy All Might dirt. This is just a puzzle from hell. Shigaraki's patience snapped as he slammed his decaying hand onto the table, making several papers jump. So what now? We didn't risk UA's security systems just to play guess the code. We don't have time to waste. Dobby, leaning against the far wall with his eyes half-lidded in thought, finally pushed off and wandered closer. He plucked a page from the pile and examined it with mild disinterest until a slow smirk pulled at his lips. I might know someone who can crack it, he said casually, as if discussing the weather. The entire table turned toward him. Spinner narrowed his eyes. Who? Dobby's grin widened, all teeth and mystery. Let's just say I know a certain little vigilante with a knack for this kind of thing. Toga tilted her head. You mean Vidian? Shigaraki scoffed. You want that brat's help? The same one who ruins half our operations. Dobby shrugged, clearly unbothered. Yeah, that one. He's irritating, sure, but he's also the smartest person I know. And let's just say. He trailed off, his voice teasing. He and I have a bit of a history. Kurojire's mist twirled around his shoulders, thoughtful. Would he really agree to help us? Not us, Dobby said, looking smug. Me. Vidian and we've got an understanding. He paused, running a finger along the edge of one of the encrypted pages, his grin sharp. I'm going to ask him for a favor. The League exchanged uncertain glances. You sure that's going to work? Spinner asked. From what I've seen, Vidian doesn't take orders, and he definitely doesn't do favors unless there's a reason. Toga twirled a knife through her fingers. What if he turns on us mid-decryption? He's still a vigilante, even if he's adorable. Dobby let out a short, amused laugh. He won't. Not with me around. Kurojire's mist stirred with skepticism. You sound very confident. I am, Dobby said coolly, heading toward the door. Vidian might not owe me anything, but we've got history. A connection. He listens to me. He didn't mention the bond between them, the strange little brother connection that had developed over time. The League didn't need to know. Let them think it was leverage or manipulation. He glanced over his shoulder, his blue eyes glinting with assurance. Just leave it to me. Back to present time. The League of Villains was buzzing with excitement. Dobby had just handed them something monumental, Vidian's decrypted files. And in those files? A treasure trove. Every note laid out in perfect, clinical order. While many had expected a dossier of weaknesses on multiple heroes, what they found was something far more deliberate, far more focused. Only one name stood out across the pages. All Might. There were no entries on Endeavor, no insights on Hawks, no curious tidbits about Best Jeanist or any other hero. Just All Might. Page after page dedicated to dissecting the symbol of peace himself, with clinical precision and meticulous detail. It wasn't just notes. It was a breakdown. His fighting style. Patterns. Energy drain timelines. But most damning of all Might's time limit. 3 hours. That was all the time the symbol of peace had before his body gave out and he became far more human, far more vulnerable. No other heroes were mentioned. No other quirks, no juicy details on Endeavor or Hawks or any of the others. Just All Might. A focused, deliberate exposure. Like the file had been written with surgical precision. Kurojire, twice, and even Shigaraki had gone uncharacteristically quiet, their eyes scanning the document in disbelief. This is real? Shigaraki asked, his voice quieter than usual. It's from him, Dobby confirmed, arms crossed, his voice flat. He doesn't lie in his notes. Ever. A ripple of anticipation swept through the League. Shigaraki looked through the decoded notes. We need to meet him, he declared, eyes glinting with determination. Dobby stiffened, his jaw tightening. No. Dobby, Kurojire said calmly. He could become an invaluable asset. Or a threat, Shigaraki added. Or a cutie. Toga squealed. He's not interested in being either, Dobby muttered, his tone sharper than usual. They pressed further, wearing him down with strategy, logic, and persistence. Dobby's shoulders remained tense, his gaze distant. A flicker of something unspoken passed through his expression, protectiveness, perhaps. Or distrust. Finally, he exhaled with the long-suffering patience of someone reluctantly letting go. I'll ask him. The warehouse had never felt more like home than when Dobby walked in again, the scent of burnt cigarettes and soot trailing behind him like a weathered cloak. Izuku was sprawled lazily on an old crate, back resting against the wall, one leg dangling off the edge. An energy drink rested loosely in his hand, condensation slowly rolling down the can. A half-eaten protein bar sat balanced on his knee, crumbling slightly with each shift in posture. His mask, as always, remained snugly in place, hiding the amused smirk beneath it. "You're late," Izuku drawled without looking, voice muffled slightly by a sip. "Traffic," Dobby answered flatly, his tone deadpan as he let himself slump against a steel beam, arms crossing over his chest. "Oh yeah." Izuku raised a brow, flicking a crumb of protein bar in Dobby's direction. "You take the express highway this time, or just decided to crash through another condemned apartment building?" One time, Dobby groaned dramatically, raking a hand through his messy, soot-streaked hair. "One time too many," Izuku shot back, a teasing lilt in his. "Honestly, the structural integrity of Mizurufu's ruins is hanging by a thread thanks to you." Dobby rolled his eyes, but the faintest hint of a grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You're one to talk. You left Tsukachi covered in glitter for a week." "Hey, it was biodegradable glitter," Izuku said defensively. "I'm environmentally conscious." "Yeah, and criminally annoying." Izuku chuckled lowly, stretching out like a content cat. "So what's up, Scarface? You don't drop by just to enjoy my charming personality. Wait, no, you do. But you have that look in your eye." There was a pause, short, but telling. Dobby's usual sarcasm didn't follow. Instead, his lips pressed into a thin line. That silence alone made Izuku straighten slightly, the atmosphere shifting ever so subtly. "The League wants to meet you," Dobby said eventually, his voice careful. Izuku blinked. Then blinked again. "Like, League of Villains League?" "No, the League of Legends," Dobby said sarcastically, eyes narrowing. "Yes, that league." Izuku let out a soft sigh and tossed his protein bar wrapper into the trash with pinpoint accuracy. "Figures. You gave them the notes, didn't you?" "All of them," Dobby confirmed, voice dropping just a little. "Including the All Might one?" Dobby nodded once, though his jaw twitched like he was holding back more than he wanted to say. Izuku let out a low whistle, the sound slicing through the stillness like a blade. "DMN. That's gonna rattle a few cages. Can't wait to see All Might's PR team scramble like headless chickens." Dobby stepped forward, boots echoing faintly against the concrete. "You don't have to go," he said, voice firmer now, like steel wrapped in smoke. "I told them I'd ask and only that. But if you say no, I'll shut it down. No questions asked. I don't care how much they whine." Izuku's glowing eyes met his, an unreadable expression passing through the masked gaze. There was a pause, a long, stretched moment where they just looked at each other. Not with suspicion, but with the weight of mutual respect, heavy and silent. Then Izuku sat up straighter with a groan, stretching like a lazy cat just waking from a nap. His spine cracked audibly. "I'll go," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Not like I've got anything better to do than walk into a villain lair and potentially get hurt for breathing too loud." "You sure?" Dobby pressed, but this time his tone was sharper, less teasing, more worried in that subtle, Dobby kind of way. Izuku's smirk widened. "Come on, Dobby. You think I'm scared of some melodramatic cosplay villains? I glitter-bombed Endeavor last month and lived." Dobby scoffed. "Yeah, but are you sure?" Izuku grinned beneath the mask, ping his head. You worried about me, Scarface?" Dobby scoffed, but his arms crossed a bit tighter. "Worried you'll say something snarky and get Toga to fall in love with you. Again." Izuku laughed. "I'm irresistible, what can I say?" "More like irritating," Dobby muttered. Izuku gave a dramatic sigh. "Fine. I'll be on my best behavior. Mostly. Maybe." Dobby stared a moment longer, then gave a reluctant nod. Not approval. Acceptance. Like he'd already mapped out 5 different ways to drag Izuku out if things went south. Still, as he turned toward the exit, his stance shifted just slightly. Body angled. A living barrier between Izuku and anything that might come through that door. Just in case. The League of Villains base was a stark contrast to the warehouse Izuku and Dobby had used as a temporary hideout. Where the warehouse had been open, sunlit during the day, and filled with the hum of dust and old machinery, the base was dark, cold, and smelled faintly of metal and mildew. The walls, cracked and coated with peeling paint, seemed to absorb the light instead of reflecting it. Every corner whispered secrets. It radiated a quiet kind of chaos contained for now, but always on the edge of boiling over. Izuku walked behind Dobby, his steps silent against the concrete floor. His movements were smooth and deliberate, like a shadow gliding over water. His eyes never stopped moving, flitting from doorway to vent to ceiling crack, analyzing every possible threat and escape route. When they stepped into the main hall, the atmosphere shifted heavy and charged like the moment before a storm. The room wasn't crowded, but the presence of its occupants made it feel that way. All eyes snapped toward them, tension coiling like a drawn bowstring. Shigaraki sat slouched in a chair, hands twitching restlessly in his lap as if itching to unleash chaos. His red-rimmed eyes narrowed at the sight of their guest. Kurogyari stood beside him, posture immaculate. His void-like face betrayed nothing, but something about the way the mist coiled more tightly than usual around his collar hinted at interest or caution. Twice bounced lightly on his feet, like a spring wound too tight. His mask couldn't hide the energy rippling off him, a strange mix of excitement and instability. And then there was Toga. The moment her gaze landed on Izuku, her golden eyes sparkled with manic curiosity. Her head tilted, lips parting in an eager grin. "So this is him?" she breathed, her voice a sing-song melody laced with something sharp. Dobby's voice cut in low and firm, standing a bit closer to Izuku, just enough to draw a line. "Careful, psycho." Izuku didn't flinch. He raised a hand in a lazy, two-fingered salute, smirking faintly beneath his mask. "Sup? I hear you guys like my homework." Shigaraki gave a dry grunt, the corners of his mouth twitching into a brief smirk. "More like the answers to a math exam I never studied for." They began circling verbally, emotionally. Questions were tossed like knives, casual and quick, meant to see how he reacted under pressure. But Izuku offered them nothing they could use. He answered with sharp wit, sarcasm, and the perfect amount of indifference, keeping his real thoughts sealed tight behind a carefully constructed persona. "So why the mask?" Twice asked, head ping side to side like a curious bird. "Because it looks cool," Izuku replied smoothly, voice laced with dry amusement. "What's your quirk?" Toga leaned in, eyes wide and gleaming. Too close. Too interested. Izuku didn't miss a beat. "No." A pause stretched between them, a silent moment thick with tension. Then Shigaraki let out a low, gravelly laugh. It wasn't warm, but there was an edge of reluctant respect in it. "You've got guts. I'll give you that." Dobby stayed back, arms crossed, leaning casually against a crumbling wall. He looked relaxed, but his eyes never left Izuku, not because he doubted him, but because he was watching everything. The League was unpredictable, and Vidian, while confident, was still just a kid beneath the mask. But Dobby saw it the way Izuku's fingers twitched slightly at his side, how he always kept one foot turned subtly toward the door, and how his gaze never truly settled. He wore confidence like armor, but underneath it his brain was always moving. Always planning. Smart, Dobby thought. Too smart for his age. Just like always. The League didn't know what to make of him yet. But they were intrigued. Cautiously so. He had their attention, and in this room, that was no small thing. The hours that followed blurred together in a haze of conversation, laughter that held sharp edges, and discussions that danced on the line between threats and camaraderie. Vidian gave as good as he got. He didn't bend, didn't break. He played their game without ever letting them see the rules he was using. And as the night wore on, a quiet, mutual understanding began to settle in the space between them. Unspoken but tangible. This wasn't trust. This wasn't an alliance. But it was something. Strangely and surprisingly, everything had gone smoothly after Izuku left the League of Villains base. There were no surprise attacks, no hidden threats, just an unexpectedly civil conversation between the #1 vigilante and some of Japan's most notorious criminals. Izuku kept his guard up, but he had to admit grudgingly that it hadn't been as bad as he had imagined. "You're so cute, Vidian. I bet you're just as sweet," Toga exclaimed, smiling as she twirled her knife. "Great. Awesome," Izuku replied flatly. "You should come more often." "Let's go, Vidian," Dobby interrupted, eager to get Izuku out of the situation. "Gladly, Scarface." The next night, as the moon cast a pale glow over Mizudafu, Vidian swung into action, leaping from rooftop to rooftop like a green phantom. It was another routine night, saving a purse snatcher here, stopping a gang brawl there, escorting a terrified civilian to safety. The usual. Until 5 pro heroes and 1 genius rodent showed up. He found himself cornered in an alleyway, his boots skidding slightly as he came to a halt. In front of him stood Endeavor, Hawks, Midnight, Present Mike, Eraserhead, and of course Nizu perched calmly on Hawk's shoulder. "Oh great," Izuku muttered, dusting glitter off his gloves. "Exactly what I planned for tonight. You know, right after brushing my teeth and nearly dying of boredom." Hawks gave him a lazy grin. "Nice to see you too, Vidian. We missed your sparkles." Every pro hero there looked at Hawks with expressions that ranged from disbelief to concern. "I aim to please," Vidian said with a sarcastic bow. "What brings the whole cast of Pro Hero, Intervention Edition, to my humble patrol?" "We're not here to joke around," Endeavor growled, fire simmering in his palm. "You never are, hothead." Eraserhead stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "We're here because someone broke into UA and stole highly classified files about All Might." Vidian raised a brow, feigning ignorance. "Is that so? Sounds like a you problem." Nizu, eyes sharp and unsettlingly calm, tilted his head. "The question is, did you decrypt the files, Vidian? You're very smart, but right now, your body language is telling me more than your words." The tension in the air thickened. Vidian's confident stance faltered just a bit. "That's so what if I did?" he finally admitted, folding his arms. "A friend asked for a favor. I said yes." The heroes tensed. "Damn it. So Nizu's theory was right," Hawks cursed. "A friend?" Eraserhead echoed, not hiding his irritation. Vidian shrugged. "Not telling who, of course." "You little—" Endeavor surged forward, flames roaring to life. The street lit up in orange and red. "Ah, here we go," Vidian sighed. In a blur of movement, Endeavor attacked. Vidian dodged, flipping backward onto a dumpster and launching himself off it with a twist. Hawks joined in, wings slicing through the air as he coordinated with Eraserhead, who activated his quirk, nullifying any physical advantages Vidian might have, though Vidian didn't have a quirk to begin with. The battle turned into a whirlwind of motion and chaos. Vidian ducked under a barrage of feathers, launched a handful of glitter bombs into Eraserhead's path, and kicked off a wall to spin midair, narrowly avoiding Hawk's dive. "Dim, you're like a sparkly gremlin," Hawks muttered, feathers zipping past Vidian's head. "I prefer glitter demon. Thank you very much," Vidian shot back, landing with a roll and tossing a smoke pellet that exploded into a cloud of shimmering haze. Eraserhead cut through the fog, eyes glowing red. "You're outnumbered, Vidian. Stop this." "Oh please, you guys always say that like it's going to work." But it was starting to. Slowly, inevitably, they began to close in. Endeavor's flames painted the sky in fire. Hawk's feathers corralled him like walls of razors. Eraserhead's gaze never faltered. Midnight lobbed her sleep-inducing mist, and Present Mic's voice blasted through the alley like a sonic grenade. Vidian was panting hard, his movements slowing. He gritted his teeth. Screw it. He yanked out his Vigilante phone and quickly dialed Dobby's number. "Dobby, I'm cashing in that favor. Now." Silence. "About time," came the raspy voice. Moments later, the sky cracked open with blue flames. Dobby dropped in like a meteor, flames rippling off his coat. He landed beside Vidian in a crouch, fire hissing around his boots. "Miss me?" Vidian huffed. "You have no idea." "Oh, I have some idea." The battlefield erupted into chaos again. Dobby lunged at Endeavor with a snarl, their flames clashing violently blue against orange in a brilliant, furious storm. The air shimmered with heat as their powers collided, sending shockwaves down the alley. Dobby's fire roared with rage, lighting up walls and scorching the ground as he pushed forward. "You never learn, old man," Dobby spat, dodging a column of searing orange flames. "Still trying to play Father of the Year? Shut up and burn, villain." Endeavor growled, his flames intensifying into a blinding inferno as he launched himself at Dobby. They clashed midair, flame against flame. The heat was unbearable, windows nearby cracked, asphalt bubbled under the pressure. Dobby twisted, flipping over Endeavor and sending a torrent of blue fire down onto him. Endeavor countered with a fiery fist, landing a hit on Dobby's side. Dobby skidded back, coughing through the smoke. "You hit like a child abuser." "Oh wait, you are one." Vidian heard Dobby's comment but had no time to react as he had his own battle to fight. "Nonsense." Endeavor snarled and charged again, fists ablaze. They traded blows, their quirks erupting with every impact. Firestorms swirled around them, lighting up the battlefield like a hellish dance. Present Mike tried to shout Dobby down, unleashing a sonic blast. Dobby snarled and responded with a wide arc of blue flame, creating a wall of fire that muffled the sound and forced Present Mike to retreat. Midnight's whip cracked through the smoke, aiming for Dobby's legs, but with a flick of his wrist, he sent a jet of fire that burned the whip mid-strike, making her curse and recoil. "I'm a little busy," Dobby growled, eyes still locked on Endeavor. "Get in line." The fire between Dobby and Endeavor roared higher, a brutal duel between two men bound by more than just power. Meanwhile, Vidian had gotten his second wind. "Round 2, bird brain," he said, diving at Hawks. "You sure you're not suicidal?" Hawks grunted, parrying a punch with his wing. "Only on Mondays." Eraserhead lunged, scarf whipping around to snag Vidian's leg, but he twisted out of reach and retaliated with a glitter bomb that blinded them for half a second. "You keep bringing glitter to a knife fight, kid," Eraserhead growled. "And I keep winning style points, old man," Vidian grinned, flipping over him. The alley was chaos, flames, feathers, smoke, and snark. Finally, Vidian set off a smokescreen that engulfed the area. "Exit, stage left," he muttered. Dobby appeared beside him, slightly singed but grinning. "You owe me a drink after this." "In your dreams." They vanished into the haze, leaving behind scorched pavement and very frustrated pro-heroes. A few blocks away, Vidian stumbled against a crumbling brick wall, breath hitching. His knees buckled for a moment, the weight of pain and adrenaline finally catching up. Dobby caught him before he hit the ground, arms bracing under Izuku's weight. "You good, or are you gonna make me carry your dramatic self?" Izuku gritted his teeth, leaning against the wall. "You wish you could carry me. Please. I've carried bigger burdens." "I'm wounded," Izuku said, clutching his chest with mock offense, then winced for real. "Nope. Not doing that again." Blood was soaking through the side of his hoodie, and a purpling bruise stretched across his ribs. His steps were sluggish now, no longer graceful and sharp like they had been hours ago. Dobby scanned the streets, narrow, dimly lit, empty save for the occasional flicker of a street lamp. "Warehouse is too far." Izuku winced as he straightened. His eyes darted down the alleyway, then toward a narrow side street. He paused, a flicker of recognition crossing his features. "Close to my place." Dobby raised a brow. "You have a place? Like, with a roof and furniture?" "Yeah, imagine that. The #1 vigilante has a house. Try not to pass out from shock." "I was kinda assuming you just hung upside down in a cave somewhere, Batman style." Izuku rolled his eyes. "Shut up and follow me." They moved quickly but carefully, navigating through the labyrinth of backstreets until they reached a small, tucked-away house wedged between a convenience store and an abandoned building. The door creaked open under Izuku's touch, the sound echoing in the silence like a ghost remembering how to breathe. Inside, the air was still and faintly musty. Dust floated lazily in the low light spilling through the cracked blinds. The living room was cluttered but familiar. There were signs of life here, Of something once warm, a blanket tossed over the back of a couch, a few photos still on the shelf, even a worn All Might mug sitting forgotten on a side table. Dobby looked around with raised brows. Cozy. Don't get too comfortable, Izuku muttered, already making his way to the couch. He dropped onto it with a groan, pulling a slightly dented first aid kit from beneath the coffee table. Sit down, Scarface. They patched each other up in silence, the quiet only broken by the occasional hiss of pain or the rip of gauze. Dobby worked efficiently, surprisingly gentle for someone who fought with fire. Izuku cleaned a gash on his arm, his fingers trembling slightly from the effort. It wasn't comfortable, but it was familiar. So, Dobby said, breaking the stillness with a smirk as he dabbed antiseptic over a singed patch of skin, still think helping me was a bad idea? Izuku snorted, wincing. Absolutely. But it was kinda worth it to see you go full fire on Endeavor. Dobby choked on a laugh. Fire? That's what we're calling it now. I dunno, man. You did scream at him like an angry parent at a school board meeting. That is the most bizarre thing anyone has ever said to me, Dobby said, wiping a hand down his face. And I hang out with Toga. Izuku grinned. Hi bar, I know. You're impossible. Yeah, well, Izuku yawned mid-sentence, slouching further into the cushions. That's why you like me. Dobby didn't respond. He just let the silence settle again. Comfortable silence. Izuku leaned his head back against the couch, his eyelids growing heavy. He felt like he forgot to ask Dobby something, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was exactly. He also hadn't been here in months. Not since his mom left. Not since everything fell apart. The house felt like a memory wrapped in dust, but somehow, with Dobby here, patching up wounds and trading snarky remarks, it felt a little less empty. For the first time in a long while, Izuku felt something almost like peace, raw and bruised, surrounded by sarcastic jabs and half-healed wounds. But it was peace nonetheless. The morning sun streamed through the broken blinds of the abandoned house, casting long, golden rays over the dust particles floating lazily in the air. Izuku stirred from the old All Might mattress on the floor, groaning as stiff muscles protested and the bandage wrapped tightly around his side itched. The ache was a dull throb that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. He blinked through the haze of sleep, squinting at the familiar cracked ceiling above. It took only a few seconds for the memories of the previous night to come flooding back in ambush, a chaotic brawl against 5 pro heroes, Dobby showing up just in time like a scorched knight in tattered armor, and them limping back to the only place Izuku could think of in the moment. His old house. That happened. With a heavy sigh, Izuku sat up, wincing as his side pulled. He dragged himself toward the kitchen, which still smelled faintly of dust and old memories. After rummaging through a cabinet, he unearthed a few unopened instant ramen packs. He squinted at the expiration dates. Still good, somehow. Breakfast of champions, he muttered under his breath, clattering a pot onto the stove and flicking the burner on. The hiss of boiling water filled the silence. Moments later, a door creaked, and in shuffled Dobby, shirtless and spectacularly bruised, hair sticking up in all directions like a scorched hedgehog. His eyes were half-lidded, voice gravelly and sleep-rough. You cooking or trying to burn the place down? Izuku gave him a sideways glance. If you count ramen as cooking, then yes. I'm basically a Michelin star chef now. Bow down. Dobby snorted and collapsed dramatically onto the beat-up couch. Gordon Ramsay's probably rolling in his grave. He's not dead. But if he tastes your ramen, he might fake his death to avoid it. Izuku rolled his eyes as he set 2 bowls on the table. Do me a favor and don't set my couch on fire with your brooding presence. No promises, Dobby said, already digging into the steaming bowl with gusto. They ate in a sort of battle-worn silence for a few minutes, the sound of slurping noodles punctuated by the occasional hiss of pain when one of them shifted too hard. Then, as expected, the banter kicked in. Remind me again why I risked my perfect criminal record to save your glitter-coated self? Dobby said around a mouthful of noodles. Because I make a mean cup of coffee, and you have a soft spot for reckless kids with superiority complexes? Izuku shot back, smug. Soft spot? More like brain damage. Izuku grinned. Ah, you care. Keep dreaming, Sparkle Gremlin. Still better than Walking Fire Hazard. I take pride in that title, thank you very much. Yeah. Just finish your noodles before you catch them on fire. An hour later, Izuku checked his phone and groaned dramatically, flopping onto the couch like the universe had just personally betrayed him. Monday. Gross. Dobby, lounging shirtless with a cup of lukewarm water, raised an unimpressed brow. You fought 5 pro heroes last night and now you're going to make lattes? Izuku dragged himself off the couch with all the enthusiasm of a cat being forced into a bath. What, you want me to starve? No, I just didn't peg you for the responsible job-haver type. Izuku shot him a smirk. O ye of little faith. I'm a man of many talents, glitter-bombing heroes, surviving on caffeine, and holding down minimum wage employment. Dobby stretched with a grunt, wincing as his ribs protested. Can't wait till you get Employee of the Month and your glitter face is framed on the wall. Honestly? That's the dream. Now scoot, fire hazard. I've got a shift. They bickered all the way to the front door, Dobby mocking Izuku's apron-wearing future while Izuku threatened to start charging rent. They split at the corner, and Izuku tucked his hood low, blending into the morning bustle of Mizudafu. The café sat tucked between a bookstore and a stationery shop, its brick exterior cozy and familiar. The bell above the door chimed as Izuku walked in, instantly hit with the rich scent of roasted coffee beans and sugary pastries. Morning, Johnny, Izuku called out, voice already adopting a customer-friendly cheer. John, the ultra-chill barista with a man bun and an aura of sentient lo-fi music, looked up from the espresso machine. Yo dude, you look like someone threw you into a blender and hit pulse. Long night. Izuku snorted. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. John just chuckled. You never sleep. Coffee's over there, therapist's office is down the street. Throwing on his apron, Izuku dove into work, welcoming the familiar motions, pulling espresso shots, frothing milk, and sketching chaotic chalk doodles on the menu board that would make Picasso cry. The front door jingled again, and in walked 2 familiar figures dressed in casual wear but exuding the unmistakable aura of sleep-deprived law enforcement. Aizawa and Tsukachi slid into their usual booth, already deep in conversation. Vidian had backup this time, Aizawa muttered, rubbing his temples. His voice was gravelly with exhaustion, yet sharp with suspicion. And not just any backup, this one was powerful. Precise. Coordinated. Tsukachi sipped his water before answering. We've got his height narrowed down to about 5 feet 5 inches to 5 feet 7 inches, slim build. Distinctive green eyes. That narrows the list considerably, but we still don't have a definitive age. Could be older than he sounds. His movements were agile. Controlled. Perhaps a failed hero? Aizawa murmured, gaze dark. Izuku, having absolutely heard all of this, forced a casual grin as he strolled over, notepad in hand. Well, look who's back. My 2 favorite caffeine addicts. Here to debrief over beans again. Aizawa looked up, unimpressed but tolerant. Morning, Izuku. Morning, Tsukachi said, though his eyes lingered a little too long on Izuku's face. You're a little too chipper for a Monday. Fake it till you make it, Izuku replied, pen poised. The usuals? Or are we shaking things up today? Same as always, Aizawa said. Izuku turned and walked to the machines, muttering to himself. I should start naming the drinks after you too. Brooding Brew and Dark as Your Soul Special. He returned a few minutes later, placing 2 steaming mugs on the table. The aroma alone could bring a dead man back to life. Tsukachi took a sip and sighed. You weren't kidding. Best coffee in Mizudafu. Izuku gave a mock bow. Told you I was talented. And charming. And devastatingly handsome. Aizawa just stared. Don't push it. Noted. But if you 2 want pastries, I'm taking bribes in the form of compliments. As he walked away, he heard Tsukachi murmur, you know, Izuku has the same green eyes as Vidian. Aizawa hummed indifferently. The kid's too young. I'd reckon Vidian would be a failed hero turned vigilante. Izuku's ears burned as he ducked behind the counter. Close call. Fin. After his shift ended, Izuku tossed off his apron, waved goodbye to John, who threw him a lazy two-finger salute, and slipped out the back. The alley was drenched in golden sunlight, the city alive with the dull roar of traffic, chattering pedestrians, and distant construction. He pulled his hoodie up, blending into the rhythm of the crowd, his bag slung lazily over one shoulder like just another tired 14-year-old student. He stopped at a nearby grocery store, the automatic doors hissing open like a sigh. Just because he was the most wanted vigilante in Japan didn't mean he could live off ramen and energy drinks forever. Even vigilantes needed a balanced diet. He grabbed vegetables, rice, eggs, and the usual necessities with practiced efficiency. But when he passed the snack aisle, his pace slowed. His eyes drifted over the shelves, lingering on the glinting packages like a kid trying to justify dessert before dinner. He squinted at a bag of cheesy chips. "Haven't had these in forever," he muttered, tossing them in. Then a bottle of fancy cold brew caught his eye. "For morale purposes," he added, shoving it into the cart. A few aisles over, he spotted spicy jerky and a pack of sour candies that he knew Dobby liked. He hesitated, then added them too. "For Dobby," he said aloud. "Not because I care. Obviously." As he paid, the cashier gave him a curious look. A kid buying groceries like any other teen, with a bag full of vegetables and sugary treats. No one suspected a thing. When he stepped outside, the late afternoon sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. His bag was noticeably heavier, the straps digging slightly into his shoulders, but his steps felt lighter. Maybe it was the snacks. Or maybe it was the thrill of being normal for just a few stolen moments. Either way, it was a nice feeling. Night had cloaked the city in a velvet hush, the lights from Mizudafu's streets flickering like constellations on the pavement. After restocking his fridge with groceries he barely had the energy to carry, Izuku geared up for another night on patrol. The hoodie came on, the mask slipped into place, and the familiar weight of his utility belt hugged his waist. The aches from the previous night still lingered, but adrenaline always dulled pain when it counted. Patrolling the rooftops like a shadow, Vidian kept his senses sharp. The city breathed below him, muffled conversations, the hum of traffic, and distant sirens. It wasn't long before a familiar gravelly shout caught his attention. "Aizawa." Izuku's eyes narrowed, spotting the pro-hero in the middle of a struggle with a group of mutant-quirked thugs. Sharp claws, shifting limbs, and snarls. These weren't your average street thugs. "Well, what's a guy like you doing without backup?" Vidian grinned as he dropped in beside Aizawa mid-battle, landing with cat-like grace and a cocky smirk. Aizawa didn't spare him a glance. "Don't you have alleys to lurk in?" "Sure, but crashing your party sounded more fun." The thugs recoiled slightly when they saw the vigilante. Their bravado flickered. Vidian wasn't just infamous, he was a nightmarish story to criminals. In a fluid blur, Izuku dashed forward, ducking a clawed swipe and retaliating with a roundhouse kick to the side of a thug's head. He danced between them with agility that made them hesitate, just long enough for Aizawa to lash out with his capture weapon and bring another crashing down. "You're welcome," Izuku sang as he flipped over a stunned opponent. "I had it handled." "Totally. That one was just letting you choke him for fun." Together, they dismantled the gang with a synchronicity that was almost poetic, Aizawa's calculated strikes balancing Vidian's agile chaos. When the last thug hit the pavement with a groan, Vidian popped his back with a stretch. "Nice little workout. We should do this more often," he teased. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. "Stay where you are." "Ah, come on, Eraser. I just saved your grumpy life. You're still a wanted vigilante. And you're still painfully slow." Aizawa lunged forward, scarf snapping like a whip, but Vidian flipped backward and bolted into the night. Thus began another round of their favorite game. Catch me if you can. Izuku darted across rooftops, flipping and twisting, always just a few steps ahead of the increasingly annoyed pro-hero. "You really need more cardio," Vidian called over his shoulder. "I'm going to put you in cuffs the second I catch you." "Promises, promises." Eventually, Izuku vanished into the shadows, leaving a very tired, very done with this Aizawa crouched on a rooftop, scowling into the night. Elsewhere in the city, In the dim underbelly of Mizudafu, the League of Villains stood in the dusty shadows of the ABC building. Graffiti covered the peeling walls, and broken windows stared out like the sockets of a dead beast. The stench of mildew, metal, and stale smoke clung to the air, heavy and suffocating. Dobby leaned against a cracked concrete pillar, arms crossed, scanning the darkness with a furrowed brow. I can't believe we're doing deals with a guy whose name literally means smelly sock. That doesn't exactly scream reliable business partner, he muttered with a scoff. Toga bounced on her heels and giggled. Maybe he smells nice? Like laundry softener with a hint of chaos. Dobby raised an unimpressed brow. Yeah, and maybe Shigaraki takes bubble baths. Twice waved a dismissive hand. We've done worse. Remember that one arms dealer who made us pay in vintage baseball cards? That guy was insane, Dobby grunted. At least, smelly sock takes yen. Toga leaned in toward Dobby, eyes gleaming. You think it's a setup? Dunno, Dobby said, gaze sharp. But something's off. Too quiet. Too easy. Like a bad rom-com date, Twice added. You know it's going to explode in your face, but you go anyway. Dobby didn't laugh. He just stared into the shadows, unease prickling at the back of his neck. The deal was supposed to go smoothly. Exchange cash and product. Intimidate if needed. The usual. But something felt off. Even Dobby, the king of playing things cool, was on edge. And he wasn't the only one. What the League didn't know was that the entire operation was a trap. The drag deal had never been real. It was bait-layered, complex bait. The Yakuza, led by the cunning and manipulative Nioi Kutsushita, had orchestrated the initial setup. But they weren't acting alone. The League had unknowingly helped engineer their own trap. In a twist of dark irony, the League had helped plan the operation what they believed was a genuine deal to push influence and product. But Nioi had already been feeding falsified intel to both the Underground and the Hero Commission. It was a double-edged trap. Lure the heroes in with promises of a large-scale drag deal and corner the League into becoming scapegoats for a catastrophic explosion. By leaking details of the operation through the right corrupt mouths, Nioi ensured the intel would reach the Hero Commission. And it did. To the heroes, it looked like a goldmine top-tier villains gathered in one place, with illegal goods on the table. They mobilized quickly, setting up a large-scale ambush around the ABC building, certain they had the upper hand. But it was all part of the ruse. The building itself was rigged. A bomb lay hidden within its structure, timed and wired to explode once tensions reached their peak. The League had been baited. The heroes had been baited. And they were all dancing to the same twisted tune. Vidian's involvement? Completely unplanned. Unfortunately, the trap worked too well. A low-ranking thug, overhearing a sliver of the fake plan, tried to brag about it in a rundown bar. That whisper traveled fast past through eager ears and careless mouths until it reached Vidian. To him, it was just another bust. A drag deal at the ABC building. Nothing major. Just a chance to break some bones and be home by midnight. He had no idea what he was really walking into. He didn't know the League had been duped. He didn't know the heroes were lying in wait. He didn't know the entire building was set to blow. Vidian thought he was crashing a criminal exchange. But instead, he'd stepped into a grand stage crafted by villains, baited for heroes, and poised to swallow everyone whole. Now, the trap had caught more than it was built for. And it was about to snap shut. The building erupted into chaos. This is the Hero Commission. Stand down, blared over megaphones like thunder cracking the tense night. Smoke bombs ignited in bursts of white, searchlights cut through the haze, and the pounding of boots against concrete became a war drum. Dozens of pro-heroes surged from every possible entrance, filling the structure with a chaotic energy driven by purpose. In the midst of it all, slicing through the confusion like a phantom, was a green-hooded blur. Vidian. Hawk's stunned voice crackled through the hero comms, sharp with disbelief. Dobby's breath caught in his throat. He spun around just in time to see Izuku Vidian slamming a thug into the crumbling drywall, his silhouette illuminated by the flashing red and blue of emergency lights. The look in his eyes was pure focus, unaware of the trap surrounding him. Dobby's stomach sank like a stone. What on earth is he doing here? He hissed, panic creeping into his voice. Then it hit him harder than any punch. Izuku wasn't supposed to be here. He didn't know this wasn't a real drag deal. He didn't know the League had been baited. He didn't know the heroes had been lured here by that same false intel. And none of them knew about the bomb. That is, until Toga, rummaging through a half-broken drawer in what looked like a forgotten office space, found a crumpled piece of paper. Guys? She called out, holding it up with a puzzled frown. You're gonna want to see this. Dobby snatched it from her, eyes scanning the shaky handwriting. Detonation countdown. 7 minutes from breach. A beat of silence passed. 7 minutes? Dobby barked, crumpling the note in his fist. That lunatic Yakuza set us all up. Twice went pale. Wait 7 minutes from when the heroes showed up? That was like, for minutes ago. Toga blinked innocently. Oh, oops. The League of Villains now knew. The heroes didn't. And neither did Vidian. The bomb wasn't a backup plan. It was the plan. And time was running out fast. The building wasn't just a battlefield. It was a stage set for destruction. The real orchestrators Nioi Kutsushita and his backers had arranged this clash with cruel precision, ensuring maximum chaos. It wasn't meant to catch Vidian, but it had. And now Dobby's worst nightmare was unfolding before his eyes. He had to get to him. He had to get Izuku out before the entire place went up in flames. The League of Villains stared in disbelief at the crumpled piece of paper in Toga's trembling hands. Dobby leaned over her shoulder, reading it once, then twice, before snatching it to confirm he wasn't hallucinating. 7 minutes, he muttered, eyes wide. 7 minutes. A bomb? Dobby choked out. Twice went pale. Wait 7 minutes from when the heroes showed up? That was like, for minutes ago. Kurojire's usually calm tone quivered. We have to move. Now. The panic was instant. Even Shigaraki, twitchy fingers crackling with decay, looked shaken. Toga looked around wildly. We have to go. This whole thing, this was never just a drag deal. It's a trap. For the heroes. Compress's mask shifted as he cursed under his breath. We helped set this up thinking it was a scare tactic, not a death trap. This wasn't just the Yakuza's idea, Shigaraki growled, voice strained. We're in this. And if we don't get out, we'll be casualties in our own plan. Kurojire didn't hesitate. A swirling portal of black mist opened beside them, stretching into safety. The League scrambled. Twice grabbed Toga. Spinner dragged a dazed Mr. Compress by the arm. But Dobby stood still. He didn't move toward the portal. His eyes scanned the chaos outside. The flashing lights. The yelling. The blur of green that darted through smoke and flame, still fighting like he didn't know danger was approaching. Izuku. Dobby clenched his fists. He hated this. Hated caring. Hated the fact that, somewhere along the line, the annoying, sassy Vigilante had carved himself into Dobby's chest like a permanent scar. Little brother, idiot, light in the dark. Dobby! Kurojire called. We need to go. He looked at the swirling portal, then at the battlefield. Forget it, he hissed, turning on his heel and sprinting straight into the chaos. The battlefield was pandemonium. Heroes and villains clashed in every direction. Smoke clouded vision. Shouts echoed off concrete. Dobby pushed through it all, fire trailing behind him like a comet, eyes locked on the one person who mattered right now. The mid-fight. A flash of green hoodie and glowing eyes. Vidian. Dobby didn't wait. Vidian, he bellowed, flames erupting from his hands. He lit the path around him ablaze, forcing thugs to scatter. He leapt over debris, closing the gap. It's a trap. There's a bomb. 7 minutes, we've got less than 4 now. Izuku turned, mid-punch, expression morphing from surprise to alarm. What? The Yakuza set this up, it's not a deal, it's a massacre. Dobby yelled. Time seemed to stop. Izuku's heart dropped. He turned toward the chaos. Hawks was mid-air, pinning a villain. Nizu was shouting orders over comms. Eraserhead was on the ground, restraining someone with his capture weapon. He didn't think. Bomb. Viridian shouted at the top of his lungs. This whole place is rigged. 4 minutes. Get out. Aizawa's head snapped up. You again. Less snark, more running. Izuku turned to Dobby, shoving him toward a clearer exit. You have to go. Not without you, Dobby snapped. Izuku gritted his teeth, knowing he had less than 3 minutes to decide, and he was probably about to do the most reckless thing ever in his life. I'll be right behind you, Izuku lied smoothly. Run. Dobby hesitated, but only for a second. Every fiber in his body screamed not to trust it, but time was bleeding away. He turned, teeth clenched, and ran. The moment he turned his back, Izuku bolted in the opposite direction. Inside the building, it was quieter but only just. The air was thick with smoke and dust, each breath scraping down Izuku's throat like broken glass. Every inhale was laced with ash, every exhale a struggle. Muffled screams from outside pierced through the smoke like echoes of a dying world, merging with the groans of twisted metal and crumbling stone. And at the center of it all sat a blinking red light, steady, methodical, pulsing like the heartbeat of danger itself. The bomb. Izuku skidded to his knees, gravel biting into his skin through his suit. His eyes widened in horror, but his hands were already moving, desperate fingers diving into his utility pouch. Hey, you got this, he whispered, voice barely audible over the crackling flames. He yanked off his gloves, hands trembling as they grasped a small pair of tweezers. It's just a bomb. Just a nightmare-fueled, villain-made, overly complex death trap, no pressure. His pulse thundered in his ears, nearly louder than the shrill beeping. 3 wires. Blue. Yellow. His thoughts blurred with panic. The wrong wire wouldn't just mean danger, it would mean failure. It would mean everyone else in peril too. If I were a sadistic mastermind, which wire would I? Beep, beep, beep. The timer jumped. Faster. Oich, come on, his voice cracked. No time. No second guessing. He snipped the yellow wire. Beep. Silence. The relief that hit him nearly knocked him over. His shoulders sagged, and he let out a breath that was half a laugh, half a sob. Oh my God. I actually... A sound too sharp. Too wrong. From behind the bomb casing, a false panel hissed open. Something small blinked with an erratic, fast, furious. Beep, 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 beep. Izuku's breath caught. His spine went rigid. The scanner hadn't picked this up. A second bomb hidden. Smaller. Meaner. Designed to be the real threat. Wait, no, no, no. He tore into the panel with shaking hands, nails cracking, fingers scraped. Wires. Another core. A cruel, last resort failsafe. The tiny screen on the device flared to life. 06. His blood ran cold. No. 05. He reached for the tweezers again, but they slipped from his sweat-slick hands. 04. He dove for them, fumbling, scraping the floor. 03. I can still fix this. 02. I know. 01. The world split open. The second bomb detonated with a sharp, focused scream of fire. It tore through the room like a vengeful spirit, the force of it hurling stone, shattering supports, and incinerating everything in its path. The explosion wasn't as large, but it was fast, precise, surgical. A trap within a trap. A perfect betrayal. The walls caved inward. The roof buckled. And in the center of it all, Izuku was gone in the fire. The ground shook violently, an ominous tremor that cracked pavement and sent nearby debris skittering like frightened insects. Dobby spun around, heart leaping into his throat, just in time to see a blinding flash explode from the side of the building. A plume of fire burst upward, so bright it outshone the moon. The shockwave hit a second later, a brutal punch of heat and noise that knocked people off their feet. Concrete splintered. Glass screamed as it shattered. A fiery storm tore through the area, devouring oxygen and reason alike. It wasn't just destruction, it was a scream in the form of flame. Time didn't just freeze, it shattered. Dobby's lungs locked up. His brain couldn't process. His entire body refused to move. The flames danced in his vision, and in their center he could still see it where Izuku had gone. One thought. One name. Izuku. Dobby's voice tore from his throat, raw and choked. No! The sound cracked through the battlefield. Aizawa shouted something, his usually calm voice tinged with horror. Hawks faltered in midair, wings buffeted by the pressure and singed by the heat. He dropped several feet before recovering, eyes wide. Nizu hit the ground hard, ears pressed tight to his skull, narrowly avoiding flying debris. All around them, everyone froze. For a moment, there was no war. No sides. Just stunned silence. This wasn't part of the plan. Not for anyone. Hawks whispered, that wasn't the main bomb? Aizawa's hand trembled, grip slackening on his capture weapon. He went back inside. He knew. He went back. He saved us, Nizu murmured, his voice almost too soft to hear. Dobby staggered forward a step, hand outstretched toward the inferno, as if sheer will could drag Izuku back from the flames. But the fire just roared louder. Why did you go back, you reckless hero? His knees buckled. He dropped to the cracked pavement, fists clenched at his sides. His scars didn't let him cry, the pain was too deep. But his whole body trembled with the agony of it. So he screamed. He screamed until his throat went raw, until it scraped against every memory and buried feeling inside him, until even the smoke couldn't muffle the sound of his grief. The others were too shocked to stop him. Too stunned to even speak. Aizawa slowly sank to his knees. Hawks hovered above, staring blankly at the flames, unable to blink. The pro-heroes, all of them, even the villains in the area, looked toward the source of the explosion like they just lost something important. They had. And then the fire swallowed everything. Smoke rolled over the battlefield like a living thing. But suffocating. Endless. Wouldn't it just be fun if I ended the story here? Would I? I hate that you know me so well, Izuku muttered, grabbing the folder and flipping through its contents. His sharp green eyes scanned the documents, brows furrowing as he registered the strange symbols covering every page. This isn't just standard encryption. This is unusual. Figured as much, Dobby said, plopping down onto the couch with a dramatic sigh. Take your time, I ain't got anywhere to be. Izuku rolled his eyes but couldn't stop the small smirk from tugging at his lips. Oh, so now I'm your personal codebreaker? Should I start charging for my services? What? And miss out on all the fun of watching you obsess over this? Nah, this is payment enough. Izuku huffed but didn't argue further. Instead, he cracked his knuckles, rolled up his sleeves, and got to work. It had been a while since he'd done something like this, but his mind was already racing with possibilities, analyzing patterns, and piecing together connections at lightning speed. Dobby watched from the couch, head propped on his hand, eyes half-lidded with boredom. Every now and then, he tossed out a snarky comment. Brat, I think I can see your brain overheating. Shut up, Dobby. You sure you aren't secretly a villain? Because the way your eyes are focused right now is kind of intense. Breaking news. In a tragic update following the explosion at the ABC building 1 week ago, authorities have now presumed the vigilante known as Vidian to be dead. Despite extensive search efforts, no body has been recovered, but the sheer magnitude of the blast has left little room for hope. Pro-hero Eraserhead, Hawks, and multiple others have remained on site since the incident. Citizens across Japan mourn the loss of the former #1 vigilante whom many saw as a symbol of rebellion, hope, and change. It had been a week since the explosion. The heroes didn't speak of it much, not directly. They were still clearing the debris, still searching through ash and stone as if they might find something, a scrap of cloth, a cracked visor, a miracle. But none came. Aizawa didn't return to UA immediately. He stayed on site, barely sleeping, barely speaking. He spent his time pacing the perimeter, scanning the scorched earth with hollow eyes. He led search after search through the wreckage, his voice hoarse from calling out Vidian's name into the empty wind. At night, he stood in the ruins, eyes unblinking, as if willing the boy to crawl out of the rubble. Hawks stayed grounded, his wings healing, his usual humor absent. He combed through twisted rebar and blackened beams with bloodied hands, refusing to rest. More than once, others had to pull him away before a collapse. He's fast, Hawks murmured constantly. He's smart. He wouldn't go down like that. Even Nizu ever the tactician seemed lost in numbers that didn't add up. How did they survive when he didn't? How did the boy who had evaded the country's best vanish without a trace? And Dobby? Dobby hadn't left the blast zone. Not really. He wandered the area like a ghost, eyes flickering with embers of guilt and something far deeper. He lit fires just to keep warm, staring into them as if they held answers. He shouted until his throat gave out, demanding that Vidian crawl out of hiding or confront him for doubting. When no answer came, he crumpled beside a charred pillar and didn't move for hours. They searched for him. Desperately. Flashback, the chaos after the blast. Smoke and debris enveloped the night. The heroes rushed through the chaos, their voices mingling with sirens and cries for help as they pulled injured civilians and allies from the wreckage. Hawks was the first to sprint toward the epicenter, pushing past pro-heroes and emergency responders. Move. Move. He was right there, he shouted, his voice breaking as he searched through the remains of the warehouse. Aizawa joined him moments later, his scarf billowing in the air, eyes wide with disbelief. DMN problem child. Vidian, he called into the thick clouds of dust, his heart pounding in his chest. Kurogiri's portal had saved the League from the main blast, but Dobby hadn't gone through it. Not when Izuku had disappeared. Ignoring the League's frantic calls, he charged into the inferno. Get back here, Dobby! Spinner shouted. It's too late. But Dobby didn't listen. He pushed past heroes and debris, desperately searching for a green hoodie or even a hint of a sparkle trail. There was nothing. Just smoke. Cries for help. They all searched. Dozens of heroes and League remnants stood together in the chaos. Search dogs were brought in. Drones flew overhead. Every crumbling wall was pried open, every collapsed hallway meticulously combed. Nothing. No signs. No traces. It was as if Vidian had been consumed by the explosion, erased from existence. Aizawa dropped to his knees that night, fingers digging into the dirt. Not again, he whispered, his chest trembling. Not another. Hawks sat beside him, his face buried in soot-covered gloves, wings quivering. Dobby stood further away, his eyes vacant, fists clenched so tightly that his skin strained. He remained still as the wind picked up, silent even when Spinner tried to coax him back. They continued searching into the next morning. The heroes set aside the fact that Dobby was a villain, finding Vidian took precedence. But eventually, the silence became heavier than hope. A week earlier, flashback. Izuku didn't hear the explosion. He felt it. The blast hit him from behind like a hammer made of fire. 1 second he was reaching for the wire, the next white-hot pain. Heat, force, pressure. A concussive roar that stole the air from his lungs. His body was thrown like a doll caught in a hurricane, smashing through walls and shards of glass, tumbling down a collapsing hallway filled with dust and flame. Darkness swallowed him whole. Flickering. Searing. It clawed at his vision, dragging him back to consciousness. He woke in what remained of a hallway, lungs gasping for air, blood thick in his throat. His suit was scorched, the hood and most of the sleeves gone. Burns patterned his skin. His entire body throbbed with pain-deep, marrow-deep agony that made even breathing a torment. But he was alive. Somehow. He coughed violently, gagging on soot, and rolled over with a groan. The ceiling above him sagged, cracked, threatening collapse. The building groaned around him like a wounded beast. Well, that was unfortunate, he rasped, voice hoarse and barely more than a whisper. -10 out of 10. Would not recommend. He dragged himself through twisted steel and rubble, every inch of movement scraping against raw nerves. His fingers bled as he clawed his way forward. Each breath was agony, each heartbeat a reminder that he hadn't died yet. He didn't know how far he went. Just that he had to keep moving. Had to escape. You know, he wheezed mid-crawl, eyebrows singed and soot-streaked. Next time someone says, go out with a bang, I'll make it reality. With extra glitter. Eventually, after what felt like hours days, he stumbled into a doorway missing its door. The apartment beyond was crumbling, but intact enough to shield him from the elements. The silence was disorienting after the chaos. Abandoned. Quiet. Safe for now. He collapsed on the cracked floorboards, dragging what remained of his pack toward him. With trembling hands, he applied the few field dressings he had. Burn cream, painkillers, a broken pair of tweezers. He sterilized cuts with leftover alcohol wipes, his teeth clenched so hard he almost cracked a molar. No comms. No backup. No glitter bombs. Just silence, pain, and ash. The faces of the people he cared about filled the haze of his pain. Dobby with those wide horrified eyes just before the blast. Aizawa, who had only seen him hours before. Hawks, reaching for him as he ran. Shinso, still back at the café, never knowing where he'd gone. Not getting his caffeine fix. They thought he was dead. He almost had been. But he wasn't. Heh, he muttered, letting his head fall back against the wall. Bet Hawks is going to be upset. And Dobby's probably going to cause some chaos. And that meant he wasn't done yet. Present day. The sky was pale when they found it. The heroes had gathered at the site again. Another slow, quiet morning of ashes and ghosts. Each footstep echoed like a whisper through the ruins, broken beams creaking beneath the weight of memory and loss. Until Nizu paused mid-step, head tilted, whiskers twitching. He narrowed his eyes at something in the distance. What is that? They followed his gaze. Across the skeletal remains of a nearby building, a towering wall of exposed concrete blackened by soot and time, was a massive painting. It didn't belong. It screamed color. It radiated life. A neon explosion of wild greens and shimmering silver glitter splashed across the stone, catching the morning light like a beacon. In sloppy, chaotic strokes, haphazard but unmistakably bold, it read, "Vidian's here." The glitter exploded in the light. A chaos of sparkles. Daring. Taunting. Familiar. Aizawa blinked slowly, breath caught in his throat. His eyes followed each line of the chaotic, glittering message, his heart stuttering in his chest. Hawks let out a shocked breath, stumbling a step closer. "There's no way," his voice was barely audible, choked with disbelief. Dobby stared. The wind tugged at the scorched edges of his coat as silence fell around them. He laughed. It was ragged, broken, a half-sob, full of happiness that tore from deep inside. He doubled over, gripping his knees as the laugh burst out of him in shuddering waves, like it had been locked in his chest for days. "Little rascal," he wheezed between breaths, voice rasping with cracked emotion. He actually survived. He wiped at his face with the back of his glove, smearing soot across his cheek. "I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. Then hug him. Then give him another piece of my mind." Aizawa didn't smile. Not quite. But something in his posture uncoiled, a flicker of life returning to his exhausted eyes. "He's alive. Vidian's back." Hawks clutched his head like he couldn't believe it, wide-eyed and grinning like a madman. "And glitter-bombed us from beyond the grave." "Of course he did." His voice cracked with relieved laughter. "Little menace." Nizu's ears twitched rapidly, eyes sparkling with sudden, undeniable glee. "Looks like we have a new mission then," he said softly. "Finding him." They all stood there, boots crunching on broken stone, eyes lifted to the ridiculous, defiant, perfectly Vidian graffiti. It shimmered in the morning sun like a flare in the darkness, an echo of rebellion and resilience in silver and green. For the first time in the long, heavy week, the weight on their shoulders lessened. He was out there. Vidian was alive. And he wasn't done yet. The end. Side Story 1. The Art of Stealing and Gaming Supplies. "You absolute gremlin," Dobby growled, pulling Izuku into a tight hug and scowling into his wild green hair. "Do you have a death wish, or are you just naturally this reckless?" Izuku, half suffocated against Dobby's shoulder, let out a muffled laugh. "A little bit of both." "You're a menace," Dobby grumbled, finally releasing him with a rough shove that made Izuku stumble back a step. "I need a break from your antics." "Missed me, though," Izuku sang, dusting himself off with a cheeky grin. "Missed my blood pressure being normal, maybe," Dobby replied dryly, though a hint of fondness crept into his voice. "Idiot." To make up for his reckless behavior, Dobby's words, not his, Izuku decided to offer a peace offering. Shopping trip? My treat. Using what, your winning smile? Dobby snorted, but Izuku just winked. 10 minutes later, they strolled into a high-end tech store, looking far too suspicious for comfort. The cashier took one look at Dobby's intense glare and Izuku's cheeky smirk and visibly braced for the worst. While Dobby piled up consoles, limited edition games, and accessories with the enthusiasm of a hyperactive raccoon, Izuku casually pulled out a sleek, fancy black credit card and tapped it against the reader. Endeavors, he whispered proudly when Dobby shot him a disbelieving look. Consider it emotional compensation. You're going to get us both in trouble, Dobby muttered under his breath, though there was more awe than anger in his voice. And honestly, I might thank you. They strutted out of the store minutes later, arms loaded down with their ill-gotten gains, zero remorse in sight. Think Endeavor will notice? Izuku asked, half dragging a massive box behind him. Considering you bought the entire Zelda collection and a VR set? Dobby smirked. He'll definitely notice. Izuku just grinned wider. Good. He deserves it. Side Story 2. Coffee-Fueled Chess of Doom. How did Vidian end up playing chess with Nizu at UA? No one knew. Maybe Nizu had lured him with the promise of an endless coffee supply. Maybe Izuku had flung one too many glitter bombs into UA's ventilation system. Or perhaps the universe simply had a twisted sense of humor. Whatever the reason, the sight of Vidian and Nizu facing off across a chessboard sent the entire UA staff into a gossipy frenzy, gathering around like vultures. Nizu sat primly, radiating smugness, a dainty cup of tea in his paw like a weapon. Izuku slouched in his chair, swirling his coffee with the intensity of a caffeine-deprived final boss. The chessboard lay between them like a battlefield. Pieces moved with the precision of a well-rehearsed dance. It was mental warfare at its finest. Every time Nizu smirked, Izuku countered with an exaggerated eyebrow waggle. Every time Izuku captured a piece, Nizu sipped his tea ominously. Somewhere in the lounge, Present Mike whispered, "Oh my god, he's actually holding his own." Hound Dog was stress-chewing a chair leg. Midnight had started a betting pool. As the game raged on without a victor, staff members slowly realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Nizu wasn't winning. Neither was Vidian. They were locked in a stalemate of pure spite and caffeine. Finally, with a twitch of his whiskers, Nizu offered a handshake. "A tie," he said, his voice almost reverent. The entire lounge exhaled as if they had just survived a natural disaster. Izuku accepted the handshake with an infuriatingly smug grin. Coffee is clearly superior to tea. Bow before the bean. He's not wrong, Aizawa muttered, lifting his ever-present thermos like a sacred relic. Before anyone could blink, a glitter bomb exploded in a shower of sparkles, and Vidian vanished like a caffeinated phantom. Expected, Midnight said, plucking glitter from her hair. Would have been suspicious otherwise. Side Story 3. Carnival of Chaos, again. This'll be fine, Izuku said, adjusting his mikumo wig and yanking his hoodie down low, trying to hide from the chaos around him. You said that last time, and we ended up fleeing like wanted criminals, Dobby muttered, jamming his hands in his pockets and pulling oversized sunglasses onto his face. Shoo, Izuku hissed, scanning the crowd with a paranoia that should have been concerning. Be quiet, fire hazard. The universe, of course, decided to respond by throwing a curveball. Standing near the rigged ring toss booth, laughing and chatting like a cruel joke come to life, were none other than Hawks, Mirko, Best Jeanist, Aizawa, Present Mike, and Midnight. Izuku's heart stopped. His coffee-fueled brain screeched in betrayal. Time itself seemed to freeze. He locked eyes with Aizawa. Aizawa blinked. Dobby, Izuku breathed, horror-stricken. Abort mission, I repeat, abort mission. In a burst of panic-fueled adrenaline, he seized Dobby's arm and yanked him into a sprint. Dobby stumbled after him, swearing under his breath, as they zigzagged through the thick crowd like gremlins on a sugar high. The heroes just stood there, processing what had just happened. Was that Mikumo? Hawks asked eventually, feathers twitching. Wasn't he supposed to be that kid we saw a while back? Mirko added, shading her eyes as she peered after the fleeing chaos. Maybe he's moonlighting as a parkour champion. Present, Mike said, voice dazed. Should we chase him? Midnight asked uncertainly. Aizawa just sipped his coffee and sighed, the weariness of a man who had seen too much weirdness to care anymore. Meanwhile, 5 blocks away, Izuku and Dobby collapsed against a grimy alley wall, gasping for breath as if they had just outrun a horror movie monster. Never, Dobby wheezed, dragging his hands down his face, never listening to your reckless plans again. Admit it, Izuku said between desperate gulps of air, you're addicted to the thrill. I'm addicted to not getting caught, Dobby snapped, though the twitch at the corner of his mouth betrayed him. Izuku grinned, wild and bright, flipping his hood up dramatically. Another day, another disaster survived. Dobby groaned. You're going to be the death of me, gremlin. You say that like it's a bad thing, Izuku sang, already plotting their next wild idea. Another totally normal day for Vidian.